We are now on the record. This is the videotaped deposition of Mike Sigur. This deposition is being held today at 1 Galleria Boulevard in Metairie, Louisiana, on June the 11th, 2021, at approximately 8:58 a.m. Would counsel present please now introduce themselves and the party they represent?
Patrick McGoey, representing Ramelli.
Matthew Sherman, representing the City of Kenner.
Edward Rakier, representing the City of Kenner.
Walter Woodruff, representing the City of Kenner.
Liz Lambert, representing the City of Kenner.
Swear the witness, please.
For the record, I feel outnumbered.
You want to put them on the record? All right, sir, I'm going to swear you in. You can raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Sigur, my name is Patrick McGoey. We met before the deposition started. I represent Bob Ramelli in litigation with the City of Kenner. Are you familiar with the case?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Can you tell me just briefly your background, your education?
Education.
Yeah.
I went through high school at East Jefferson, a year and a half or two with USL studying accounting.
All right, so do you have a college degree?
No.
Okay. And when did you get out of USL or stop?
1974.
All right. Can you briefly tell me your work history? Doesn't have to be detailed, but just generally from 74 to present.
74, I started with the City of Kenner Police Department and worked there pretty much through 2014. Had a break or two in 1980, I think it was. I left for a year. 1985 through 90, I left again. Came back in 1990 and stayed till 2014.
Okay, and what was your, what roles did you hold with the police department over those years?
Started off as a jailer, then was assigned to narcotics division. I worked undercover narcotics first year and then went into narcotic enforcement the balance of the 8 years. And I came back to the Kenner Police and the Detective Bureau. And that's when 85 when I left, but then when I came back in 1990, I was a administrative officer for Chief Kajimi.
Did you go to any type of police academy for training before going into the police department?
Well, the interesting thing was in 1974 we had no P.O.S.T, which is Police Officer Standards and Training. So they didn't require academy, but once P.O.S.T came in place, they did send us to a abbreviated or whatever was required at the time academy.
And when was that?
Probably 1977 or something.
And the brief academy you went to, what was that? Just like a continuing, or I don't know, what was, I'm not
Well, it
familiar
was
with
like a 3-week course that we went through that was put on by the City of Kenner. Didn't have its own academy, so the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office Academy staff put it on.
Okay. So then other than that 3-week Jefferson Parish training seminar in 1977, did you have any other police academy training?
Well, academy, not necessarily. In 1979, I went through a 10-week DEA narcotic agent training.
Okay. All right. And, but after, from 90 on, you were what position with the police academy?
In the police at 1990 to 2014, I was in an administrative position with Chief Kajimi, Chief Caraway. And in that position, I managed all of the non-police personnel in divisions.
So was it safe to say since 1990 you weren't working the streets or narcotics or anything for the police department?
Well, no.
Okay.
I just was in an administrative position. I was still a reserve police officer.
Okay. What is a reserve police officer?
It's the same as a full-time police officer, it's just I don't have to work full-time.
And who do you work, who have you been a reserve police officer with?
City of Kenner.
Okay. And how long have you been a reserve police officer with the City
I
of
am
Kenner?
presently still a reserve officer.
All right. When did that start? All the way back in the 70s?
Yes. Well, no, 70, I was a full-time. 1990 was when I went into the reserve status. because I stepped down from full-time police to administrative.
Gotcha. So you were full-time administration with the police department starting in 1990 and part-time reserve police with the city of Kenner
From 90, yes.
to present.
Yes.
Okay. And then you got on the city council for the city of Kenner?
I retired in 2014 after 33 years of service, full-time, so retired, and then that's when I ran for the city council.
And you have been the city council representative for District 2 since 2014, is
Yes.
that right? Can you tell me what you did to prepare for today's deposition?
Well, read the case, read the suit, met with my counsel, and went over that suit.
Okay. When you say you read the lawsuit, you read the petition? That's
Oh, that's
the
what you
lawyer
call it,
term,
yeah.
Did you read any of the other filings in the case?
No.
Did anything, when you read the petition, what if anything stuck out to you?
Well, a lot of things, I guess. I mean, the information that was alleging that the contract was terminated was complete falsehood to me because we've never terminated any contract. We just stopped service.
Okay. So when you read the petition, that struck you as being a false allegation. You contend that the city of Kenner didn't terminate Romelli's contract.
Object to
Correct.
the form of the question. You can still answer.
Fair enough.
You can, when I object, you can still answer.
Okay.
Anything else?
Okay, let me think back. As 2015, January 5th of 2016, I was fortunate, perhaps, to become acting mayor. I was the one that signed the renewal contract, but the contract had been renewed by the council in December of 2015 as it was presented by the former mayor, Mike Yenny. So, yes, I'm familiar that I signed the contract.
So that's an interesting point. So for the contract issue and the litigation, you were not only a city council member in December of 2015 that approved the ordinance to enter into the contract with Romelli, but you were also the acting city mayor in February of 2016 to execute the contract on behalf of the city of Kenner.
Correct.
Was there anything else that stood out for you in the lawsuit?
It was
Yeah, well, we can get into the
voluminous.
specifics later.
Yeah.
I'm just generally asking, hey,
Yeah,
did
well,
you see
no,
something say, hey, what is this guy talking
Obviously, the
about?
most serious was I said that there was never, to my knowledge, any termination of a contract. It was just services are put aside while we exercise our option to look elsewhere.
And where did you come up with that understanding that the city of Kenner didn't terminate Romelli's contract, that they just decided to put aside the services?
Well, that's, I think, the city of Kenner mayor.
Let me just object
yeah.
real quick. Anything that you and I talked about is certainly attorney-client privilege. Don't waive anything, don't say it. But if you have your own personal knowledge, that's different. Just don't,
Right,
nothing
no.
that we talked about.
Sure, and I was going to answer is that the current mayor is the one that handled that part of the contract. I had no part of it.
So prior to May 1st, 2020, did you have any discussions with the mayor concerning whether or not the city was terminating the contract or just not ordering any services?
Well, we had council meetings that, what was it, February or March 20th, when we were to vote on a new contract with a new provider. At that meeting, there was a lot of conversation.
Okay. Other than council meeting, I believe it was March 5th, because I was actually at that council meeting,
Okay. And it
where
was somewhere in that timeline. But
where the IV waste contract was proposed, and Mr. Romelli spoke at that council meeting. Do you remember that?
yes.
Okay. So other than what the mayor said at the March 5, 2020 council meeting, did you have any other discussions with the mayor concerning whether the city was terminating Mr. Romelli's contract or just not agreeing to order any services?
Well, no, I mean, There's conversations, but nothing on the details because it's his privilege to do what he does with contracts for the city. As council, we only approve contracts that he would submit to us for approval. So if he said, I'm presenting a contract to y'all for approval, okay, when it comes to us, we'll look at it.
So you, the mayor, and several other council members didn't get together prior to the March 5th, 2020 council meeting to discuss the IV waste contract?
Object to the form of the question. I think it mischaracterizes the testimony, but
You can answer.
I don't recall in that format. We've had discussions that he was looking to do something, but not where he's going per se.
So what discussions do you recall having before the March 5,
Hey guys, look,
2020?
I'm exercising the elements of the contract that have a non-exclusionary term paragraph in there that says the city can have multiple garbage contracts.
And do you recall who was present when you had these conversations before March
Not
5?
specifically, no.
But you recall having conversations with the mayor prior to the March 5th council meeting?
He brought it to, yes.
How did he bring it to you before then?
He might, like I said, in passing or at lunch, he might have said, look, guys, I'm looking at expanding our garbage pickup contract. I'll be presenting something to y'all at a council meeting shortly.
Right. I'm gonna I apologize, you're the first witness being deposed in this case, and that usually results in you getting to see the most documents, so.
it's only one box.
It's only one box, so that's good for you.
We heard there was boxes. I thought there's.
Connie has seen more than one box before, I can tell you that. I'm going to show you what I'm going to mark as Exhibit 1, which is a 2017. Yeah, there you go.
2007.
2007, I apologize. Thanks for correcting me. 2007 contract between Ramelli Janitorial Services and the city of Kenner. Now, you weren't a council member at this time, right?
Correct.
So I take it you had no involvement in the execution of this contract.
Correct.
Did you have any role in the negotiation of this Exhibit 1 2007 contract?
No.
In connection with the 2016 contract that you did execute with Ramelli, do you recall this 2007 contract ever coming up?
No, that was Mayor Yenny, and he presented to us the contract that he was putting forth at a council meeting.
And just, here, we'll attach as Exhibit 2, the 2016 contract between the city and Ramelli. You can have those side by side so you can look at them. So Exhibit 2, the contracted issue in this case, you testified earlier, you executed it, correct?
Correct.
Now, this cover letter on the first page is sent from Michael Quigley, Chief Administrative Officer. He was your CAO at the time?
Yes.
All right, and that's your name up at the top on the left, Michael Sigur, Acting Mayor?
Yes.
So, under the Kenner City Charter, you were the person charged with executing this contract with Ramelli in 2016?
Any contract.
Any
Under my-
any and all contracts, is that
Yes.
safe to say?
Yes.
Okay. Did I understand, though, that this contract was originally presented to you as a council member in December of 15?
Correct.
And that was done by the Yenny administration?
Correct.
Did you have any role in the negotiation of the terms and provisions contained in the 2016 contract?
No.
Who handled the negotiations on behalf of the city of Kenner and Ramelli? Do you know?
Don't know.
You weren't privy to any of the discussions concerning the negotiations for the provisions in the contract?
Correct.
What did you do before executing this contract? Exhibit 2.
When it was presented to us on our council agenda, I read through it.
Other than reading through it, did you have any other, did you do anything else? You talked to the city attorney. I'm not asking you what he told you at the time. Did you have any conversations with council members or anyone else that you recall?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Who was your city attorney in 2016 when you executed this contract?
I believe it was Mike Powers. I'm trying. We've had some ups and downs with city attorneys, but I believe it was Mike Powers. But yeah, I think it was Mike Powers.
Now, before you executed this contract in 2016, you were on the city council for approximately 2 years. You said 2014, or
Yes.
a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
In that time period, from 2014, when you first got on the city council, until you executed the 2016 contract, did you have any interactions with Nikki Nicolosi concerning Romelli's contract or the ordinances that you would be brought in front of you as a council member?
Just object. I think it's a compound question. What
Okay.
dates you talk? I'm confused by the question.
Sure. From 2014, when you got on the city council, till 2016, when you executed the Romelli contract, did you have any meetings with Nikki Nicolosi concerning passing ordinances for the Romelli contract?
Not for the passage.
What meetings do you recall?
Well, he was our representative to call when we were having, say, an issue with a resident calling saying, hey, I didn't get my trash picked up, or my garbage can's broken and I need it repaired. He was presented to me when I came on the council as the contact person to reach out to.
Okay. I'll show you what I'm going to mark as Exhibit 3, which is a September 26, 2014 email. I ask you to take a look at it, read through it, and then I'm going to ask you some questions. You had a chance to read it?
Yes.
Okay, so what it looks like in this email, Mr. Nicolosi is reaching out through Teresa Hastings. Who is that?
She's the council clerk's assistant.
Okay. And she's saying Mr. Nicolosi wants to set up meetings with each council member and their assistant to discuss procedures for the trash garbage collection in the city of Kenner.
Okay.
Do you recall meeting with him in 2014 over these issues?
In October of 2014, I'd been on the council for July, August, September, 4 months, and I was still in the naive, unknown newness, and probably did, but I don't recall.
Okay. And you say you were probably in the naive unknownness. What's the significance of that?
Well, just, I'm a new councilman. I don't know all of the parameters of where I'm going, what I'm doing. I'm learning as we go along. There's no training course to be a councilman. Get on there, you show up, and they'll say, okay, here's an agenda. You got to vote on these things. Okay, I got to do some legwork. Okay, yeah, I got to go read the whatever it is. So I presume this is inferring that in October of 14 there was some discussion. But like I said, we didn't, to my knowledge, renew the contract till December of 2015. So other than what this is purporting that he asked to have a meeting, again, I probably, but I don't recall.
Okay. As you sit here today, do you recall after this, October 2014, do you recall any meetings with Mr. Nicolosi and other council members to discuss Romelli?
We always had ongoing discussions relative to the contract that was in place, like I said, relative to whether, one of the things I learned as a councilman is that one of the largest number of phone calls we receive is relative to garbage. So whether it be, hey, my garbage didn't get picked up this morning, or hey, my can is broke, I need a replacement. They would reach out to their councilman and ask us for assistance. I would then contact Mr. Nicolosi and ask for assistance.
Okay. It says in this email that Mr. Nicolosi wants to have at least 3 members at a time in an effort to expedite this process. He wanted to meet with 3 council members at a time.
Okay?
Do you recall ever meeting with Mr. Nicolosi and additional council members?
No.
Okay.
Done. Put the stack right here. Court report's gonna take all these.
I'm going to show you what I'm going to mark as Exhibit.
Okay.
I'll keep them organized.
I'm going to show you what I'm going to mark as Exhibit 4. As you read that real quick. Rachel. So this is a November 13, 2015 email from Mike Quigley to you, Councilman Councilman Carroll, and some other people, including Nikki Nicolosi, regarding meeting to discuss with Romelli on Thursday, November 19th.
Yes.
So this was probably a meeting prior to the December 15 meeting where the council approved the ordinance to enter in a new contract with Romelli.
Time-wise, it would be in that timeline, because, yeah, December of 15 was when it got approved.
All right. Do you recall what was discussed at that meeting?
Again, right now, I can't recall attending the meeting. I see the email that was sent to my email address, but again, no offense, in that timeline, I'm still going from various meetings, and to try to recall any one particular one right now without more detail is like, okay, might have been there, probably been there, but I don't recall.
I understand. I'm just, for the record, trying to
I
get
got
what you know, what you don't know,
Sure.
and find out things you know. So I'm going to show you now ordinance number 11974, which was motioned by you and executed on December 17, 2015. You recognize this to be the ordinance where you all approved the city, the mayor, to execute a contract with Romelli for 10 years?
Yes.
Patrick, I think just for the record, Ed's telling me that you might have mixed up the summary number and the ordinance number, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate that. I misspoke earlier. It was this is ordinance number 11025.
Okay.
Do you know what the difference is between the summary number and the ordinance number?
Ordinance number is what we attach it to when it passes and becomes law. The summary number, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it has something to do with the filing, I guess, because I see it, but I've never explored to say what it's for. I only know ordinance numbers.
Fair enough. Thank you. Do you recall anything that was said at this council meeting concerning the contract?
I'm sure the administration presented some information to say why they wanted to enter into this contract, and obviously perhaps council members commented, and then the vote was taken.
Now, shortly after, let me take that. Do you still have the contract in front of you? We'll start with the 07 one first. Now, I'm gonna, actually this was even predates that 07 contract, the 07 contract. I'll show you an email I'm gonna mark as Exhibit 6, which is an email dated November 8, 2006. I should take a look at that real quick.
Patrick, just for the record, let me just object to Exhibit 6. I don't see Mike's name on here, just showing him the witness, a document where his name's on email, that his name's not on, subject to that objection.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply that you were on the email. I was just showing you the email, and I was going to ask you some questions about it.
Okay.
Particularly, I'm interested in the photographs. You see, this is a press release issued by the City of Kenner on November 8, 2006, titled "Romelli Takes Full Charge of Kenner Garbage Collections." Right?
That's what it says, yes.
And it says, have you seen them? The big new white trucks, all 12 of them, with bold blue lettering, hitting the ground running last Saturday morning as Romelli Waste LLC, the city's new garbage contractor, took over normal curbside garbage collection duties in the city. Did I read that correctly?
I didn't exactly follow it word for word, but okay, yes.
The 2007 contract, as well as the contract you signed in 2016, was with Romelli Janitorial Services, Inc. But the trucks that were, this press release and the trucks that were driving around the City of Kenner say Romelli Waste LLC. Do you see that?
Okay.
Had you seen these trucks driving around the City of Kenner for the last 10 years?
I've seen Romelli trucks. I didn't pay attention to what it said, Romelli Waste LLC or whatever terminology you just used to imply it was different.
So, well,
Okay.
were you aware that Romelli Waste LLC was the company providing the trucks
Yeah.
for the contract? And it refers to Romelli Waste as the city's new garbage contractor in this press release.
Okay.
Were you aware, did you believe that Romelli Waste was the city's garbage contractor?
Sure.
And the City of Kenner had approved that way back in 2006?
I was not on the council or saw that they approved it. I can make the assumption that that's what they did because they're now driving the streets picking up trash, but that would be my assumption.
That's your assumption. No one ever told you otherwise?
Right.
All right, I'm going to show you another press release. This one dated November 19, 2007. Ask you to take a look at that. I know this is before your time on the council. The mayor back then was Ed Munez,
Yes.
and he was the one who contracted in 2007 with Romelli Janitorial.
As mayor, I'm sure that was what he did. I didn't see the contract at the time or was present at the meeting.
All right, and this says, officials of Romelli Waste LLC said the Thursday garbage routes in Kenner will not be collected on Thanksgiving Day, so its employees can be with their families for holidays.
That's what I'm reading.
Did you have any conversations with Mr. Munez concerning Romelli Waste's involvement in being the garbage collector for the City of Kenner?
Again, not that I recall.
All right. show you what I'm gonna mark as Exhibit 8. This is a letter from Mayor Muniz on June 5, 2008. Mr. Muniz says, to whom it may concern, the firm of Romelli Waste LLC has been the contractor for garbage and waste pickup in the city of Kenner since November 2006. Is that accurate, as far as you understand?
Well, what the words are on the paper?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
And what about whether or not Romelli
Oh,
Waste had been driving
I'm gonna
trucks?
do this. You're going back to 2008. You're showing documents from 2008. You're asking questions from 2008. He's already testified that he didn't. I think 2014 is when he first got involved.
I'm familiar.
I don't see the relevance at all. I know you're trying to prove a point that Romelli was doing a good job in 2008. I think the letter speaks for itself. We're
I understand.
all day. If we're going to go back, we might as well go back to when Romelli started doing garbage pickup. I mean, it's just completely irrelevant. And you're asking questions about whether or not things are true in a letter that was written by a former mayor that he already testified he can't remember if he had any conversations with. Subject to that objection.
Fair enough. Do you have any, as you sit here today, do you have anything to dispute the fact that Romelli Waste LLC was the contractor for garbage collection in the city beginning in November 2006?
Looking at these documents, that's what I would assume.
So you don't have any contrary information?
No.
All right, I'm going to show you what I'm going to mark as Exhibit 9, which is a March 5, 2010 letter from Keith Conley, the city attorney. Do you know Mr. Conley?
Yes.
Was he the city attorney back in 2010?
Again, if he's putting this letter out saying he's city attorney, I would assume that.
And it looks like he's copying Councilman Stagny, District 2. Was that the council member before you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, was Keith Conley a competent lawyer?
Object to the form of the question.
You can answer.
Well, I don't have an answer. I don't know his legal capability as a lawyer. I've never been in court with him. I've never had him as representing me or suing me or anything. I don't know anything about his legal capabilities.
Fair enough.
Other than I presume he's an attorney because he says he's an attorney.
Okay. He says in this letter, the contract between the City of Kenner and Romelli Waste LLC states the hours of operation for collection of refuse and litter, and it goes on. So, would you agree with me that in 2010, Mr. Conley was representing that the City of Kenner and Romelli Waste LLC had a contract for the collection of
Just to
garbage?
make a standing objection. Again,
Are you aware of that?
2010 letter written by Keith Conley that
again,
is showing to Mike Sigur, who wasn't even a councilman in 2014. So.
And I'll be honest, I can read this and I can understand it and I'll agree with what you're saying. But do I have any other knowledge either way? No.
Perfect. That's all I was looking for. Did you ever have any discussions with Mr. Conley about that?
No.
All right. Now I'm going to show you a press release from 2016.
There we go.
There you go.
Waiting for it.
Boy, didn't see this coming.
Oh, we're gonna go back to 2000, almost to when I lived in Kenner.
I don't know. Did I give you 3 or no?
Maybe 2, yeah.
Sorry, Rachel. This Exhibit 10 was a press release dated February 5th, 2016, and it's got your name under the seal as acting mayor. Is that correct?
Correct?
All right. So you issued this press release?
I did.
All right. Did you review it before it went out?
I obviously did.
Okay. And I note on here, you say in the second paragraph, the City Council previously approved a new 10-year garbage contract with Romelli Waste.
That's correct.
Okay. And the contract you signed says it's with Romelli Janitorial Services, Inc. So my question to you, and that's why I showed you all the prior press releases and pictures of trucks and things like that, is were you aware that Romelli Waste in 2016, when you executed this contract, was the company providing the trucks and the services for the contract.
Object to the form of the question to the extent it calls for any legal conclusions or interpretations.
You pointing this out, but obviously I did not pay attention to that when I authorized this press release to go out, that it said Ramelli Waste versus a contract between Ramelli Janitorial Service. You're pointing it out to me now, so I'm understanding there's a difference.
Did you have any discussions with anyone in 2016 regarding Ramelli Waste's involvement in the 2016 contract that you executed?
When I came in as acting mayor on January 5th, I relatively soon asked, I want to restart recycling. How do I go about it? My staff pointed out that it was in the contract as an option. All I had to do was fund it. So I started working on funding and authorized the funding. That's what triggered this press release to start off by saying, I am authorizing the return of curbside recycling for the first time in more than a decade. That was my main goal. The rest of this was put into this as part of press release. It was obviously also things that I was not maybe privy or aware that took place prior to me being mayor or prior to approving the contract as a councilman. Things like why it says janitorial service and why it's now saying waste management. I don't have an answer.
Okay, but I'm asking just because this is a press release with your name on it.
Yes.
Did you draft it?
No.
Who would have drafted it?
My public information officer at the time.
And who would have that been?
I think it was Bob Ramelli. I mean, not Bob. Bob. I know you.
Bob Ross?
Bob Ross.
Is he still the?
Yes.
He's still presently the press release?
Yes.
All right, so in 2000, fair to say that in 2016 when you executed the contract and sent out this press release, you were aware that Ramelli Waste had been providing services for Kenner for the garbage collection contract for over 10 years.
And let me just insert, I'll say I was aware that Ramelli was doing waste pickup. Whether they were Ramelli Waste LLC or Ramelli Janitorial Service, I don't know there's a difference.
You don't know that there's any difference?
Right.
Okay. And do you have any conversations, you didn't have any conversations with prior administrations regarding that topic?
No.
Sorry about that. I'm just looking for a provision that I called being in there. But. on page 28 of the contract you executed in 2016. Yeah, in that first full paragraph, it says each vehicle shall have clearly visible on all four sides of the contractor's truck number and on two sides of the contractor's telephone number. All vehicles used in performing the service/work shall have clearly visible on all four sides the contractor designated truck number, which individual digits shall not be less than blah, blah, blah. Going back to exhibit, a picture of the trucks, exhibit 6. What name was displayed on the side of the trucks that Romelli used to service the city of Kenner?
Well, let me first state, you're showing me a picture of a truck. I don't know that this truck actually serviced the city of Kenner. But this truck does say Romelli Waste LLC.
Okay. If you turn to that page you're looking at, the caption underneath it says, "New semi-automated garbage truck from Romelli Waste now working the streets of Kenner."
I see that sentence, yes.
And that was attached to a press release from the city of Kenner. But you're telling me you're not aware that that was the truck that was in Kenner?
You have to understand, you're showing me a picture asking me, do I know if this truck serviced the city of Kenner? And I'm trying to explain, no, I do not know that. I recognize this picture as a truck with Romelli Waste LLC on the side, but I do not know if this truck serviced the city of Kenner.
What do you recall being on the sides of the truck, the Romelli trucks that serviced the city of Kenner? What name?
Romelli,
That's all you recall?
that's all I recall. Just like going back to this press release, as you pointed out, it says Romelli Waste, but as I'm reading the rest of it, it just keeps referring to Romelli. So at times, it's just referred to as Romelli.
Now, the 2007 contract in front of you, I know you weren't a party to it. But I'm going to ask you a question that's going to be relevant to the contract that you did execute on behalf of the city of Kenner. On page 5, there's a heading titled Non-Exclusive Franchise. It says this contract shall constitute a
Wait. Oh, okay. It's letter E, but on page 5.
Yeah, letter A. This contract shall constitute a non-exclusive franchise for the collection and disposal of residential and commercial solid waste, all as set out in Louisiana Revised Statute 33:4169.1. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
All right. As a city council member, does the term non-exclusive franchise have any meaning to you? Do you know what that means?
Just object to the extent it calls for any type of legal interpretation or conclusion.
Your understanding?
My understanding is that it can be 1, 2, 3, 4, or more people having the same contract to do the same thing in the city of Kenner or the state of Louisiana.
Okay. That's what you understand a non-exclusive franchise to be?
Yes.
All right. Now turn to the contract that you executed in 2016. Please review it and let me know if anywhere
Where
it...
at?
Well, my question is does it refer to Romelli as having a franchise? Like the 2007 contract did.
Same objection. Any of these questions that deal with any type of legal interpretation or conclusion. Same objection.
First off, Lieutenant, you pointing this out, I'm going to go back. I don't know that Mr. Romelli has a franchisee organization. That I interpret to mean someone has a business product and they authorize others to do it. He and he alone was this Romelli company that we're dealing with. I don't know of any other franchise components of it. Even though that word's in there, I had nothing to do with that contract.
Understand?
This one, if you'll point out the page number of the non-exclusive.
Sure, I'll point that out to you. It's
Page 43.
Page 43. Confirm for me that in the contract you executed, the non-exclusivity provision does not reference a franchise.
Same objection.
Contractor acknowledges and agrees that the rights and obligations conferred and contained herein shall be non-exclusive in nature, and the city makes no representations or warranties to the contrary. City reserves the right to contract with other parties for any and all work/services contained herein. No, I do not see the word franchise in that paragraph.
Do you recall anyone at the council meeting in December of 2015 or when you executed the contract in February of 16 mentioning that Mr. Romelli was getting a franchise from the city of Kenner?
Not to me.
On the first page of the contract you signed under the third to last whereas clause, this one right here, it says pursuant to said powers in accordance with LARS 33:4169.1A3, city desires to enter into a time contract with contractor. As you sit here today, do you know what a time contract is under that statute?
No,
You're not familiar with that either?
not the terminology. No, I'm not a lawyer. If that's a legal term in a contract, I'll have to yield to my counsels to advise me otherwise.
Given that you didn't recall anyone discussing franchise before you executed this contract, do you recall any discussions with anyone concerning why the city was entering into a time contract versus a non-exclusive franchise like the 2007 contract?
Same objection.
Do you recall any conversations?
No.
All right. In the contract you executed, let's look at section 7.2. It's on page 41. What was that?
Is that mine?
It might be.
It's listening. I don't know what it's doing.
There's a paragraph on termination. You reviewed this in preparation for today's depo, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you're familiar with it?
I read it. Can't say I'm familiar with every word to mean what it may not mean or mean to me.
Sure. But when you read the petition, the thing that struck you was that we alleged that Kenner had terminated the contract, right?
Okay? Yes.
So then when you prepped for the day, you looked at the termination provision, correct?
Object. I don't think he said that. I think that mischaracterized his testimony.
Take a look at 7.2E. Do you recall any conversations before you executed this contract with anyone with the city of Kenner or Romelli concerning how this provision found its way into the contract?
No, because I didn't negotiate the contract. I just signed it as put in effect based upon the council previously approving it from the mayor at that time, presenting it to them as a contract that he wanted to enter into.
So if Mike Yenny were to testify concerning how this provision made it in the contract, you would have no evidence to support or contradict what he testified to. Is that accurate?
I guess. I never had any conversation with him or anybody on that paragraph in this contract.
What do you understand section 7.2E to mean?
Same objection.
Just looking for your understanding.
I would take it to mean that if the mayor, who is empowered to administer these contracts was to make a determination that he wanted to terminate a contract, which I understand he has the power in this contract. Even though he didn't sign it, he would then have to work through it. If he wanted to terminate, he would then refer to this section and follow what's in here to do so.
And if the mayor wanted to terminate this contract under 7.2E, what effect does that have on the contractor, Romelli?
Object to the form of the question that clearly calls for some type of legal.
What's your understanding is all I'm
Same
asking.
objection.
Again, I couldn't say, because if this termination clause of the contract was to be invoked, that would be the legal side to determine the clause or whatever cause of effect it would have. I literally just couldn't give you an example of what cause or effect it would have.
Well, the provision says contractor shall immediately discontinue all service/work. Do you see that?
Yes.
What do you understand that to mean?
Let me just, Patrick, he just testified that he
I
doesn't
understand.
know. I know you're trying to get an answer out of him. You're asking him to interpret a contract that clearly he didn't write. He's already testified he didn't negotiate. I think he's already said he doesn't know. I think he also said he'd have to refer to his legal department. So
What do you understand shall immediately discontinue all service work to mean?
same objection.
It would mean I would refer to my city attorney to invoke a contract clause by whatever means was necessary.
And city attorney, who are you referring to?
Whoever the city attorney is at the time. It depends on who's invoking this contract.
Who's the city attorney today?
Lee Russell.
And who was the city attorney back in 2016?
Lee Russell.
Okay. Wasn't Mr. Rapier?
No.
All right. I'm not asking you what you would do. I'm asking you what you understand this sentence to mean. This is English. This is in a contract that you executed.
Patrick,
And
I'll let you finish.
I'm entitled to an answer, and I'm going to ask it.
He's answered it.
No, he hasn't.
No. Let me finish. There's a difference
No,
between
no,
I'm
no.
entitled to an answer and I don't like what I'm getting. And you know you don't like what you're getting. He says he doesn't know, and he'd refer to his city
He didn't say
attorney's
that.
office. He
Is it
just
your
said-
is
he
it your
just said
test?
that.
Is it your testimony? You don't understand what the English language means when it says contractor shall immediately discontinue all service work.
And let me.
Is that
time
your-
out. Wait. Let me
is that
time
your
out and
testimony?
object. Do not badger the witness and do not mock the witness. We're not going to do that here today. You are. You're getting smart with them.
No,
and you're
I'm
getting
repeating the exact BS objection you made. He understands what this provision means. All I'm asking for is him to tell me what it means.
What? But isn't that a legal interpretation? Go ask the court what that means. That's what we're doing. You're asking him, who's not the judge, to interpret what a sentence in the contract means. He's already said.
So make your objection and let the witness
First, don't
answer the
badger the
question.
witness and get smart with the witness, because I'll shut it down now if you're going to do that. And second, don't keep at. He's answered the question the same way you just did, and then we can move on.
What do you understand this sentence to mean, Mr. Sigur? It's not a very complicated question. What do you understand when you signed a contract that included a provision that said contractor shall immediately discontinue all service work if the mayor terminates it? What did you understand that to mean?
Same objection.
It would mean to me that the mayor would go to his legal team and say, I intend to invoke this. You do what you need to do to put it in place.
All right. What is the service or work Romelli was to provide under this contract?
It's a variety of things.
Well, let's discuss them.
Okay.
What did you understand he was supposed to do under this contract?
Pick up garbage. Pick up trash.
Pick up recycling?
Was not in this contract, which was approved in December of 15. It was added by me in February of 2016.
When did you sign the contract we're talking about right now?
We know when I signed it. What does it say? December, let me find it, February 4th or something, 2016. February 4th, 2016.
So did the contract you signed with Romelli in February of 16 include recycling?
As I interpreted it from my legal team, when I asked, how do I invoke recycling? It was told to me that it's in the contract as an option. I need to fund it. So somewhere between January 5th, when I took over as acting mayor, and February 5th, when this press release was made, it was worked through that I could fund it, and it was then invoked, or whatever the terminology is, to use that section of the contract to allow me to bring in recycling and authorize payment to Romelli for the service of adding recycling to his contract.
So when you signed the contract in February 16 with Romelli, you understood that that contract provided the terms by which Mr. Romelli would pick up recycling. Is that accurate?
Object to the form of the question.
I presume, I mean, it's what, no offense, Mr. Good, I am not a lawyer.
I'm not asking you to be a lawyer. I apologize. Go ahead. You can finish.
You're actually asking me to be a judge, but
I have, in my role as mayor or my role as councilman, have legal services available to us. They take an idea and make it into a functioning contract. For me, as a non-lawyer, to try to interpret language, even though they are basic words in the English language, but when you put them together and you phrase them the way lawyers phrase them, I cannot in any way, shape, or form say that that means what I thought it was supposed to mean, because only lawyers can interpret that. That's why we have courts. The judges work between the two lawyers to help decide what was intended in the language of the contract. You asking me personally as a layperson, but as now a councilman, I wanted trash picked up. Okay, trash is picked up. But what all of these words here do to invoke that or allow changes to that trash to be picked up, that's why we have lawyers.
I understand. We started today's deposition off by you telling me one of the things that came to your attention when you read the petition was that the petition claimed that the city of Kenner had terminated the contract, but you didn't think that was the case. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So now I'm showing you the provision dealing with termination. And my question to you, sir, is how, when the city of Kenner sent this March 3rd, 2020 letter to Mr. Romelli, which I'll give you a copy. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm going to mark it as Exhibit 11. There's also Exhibit 5 on it. When the city of Kenner sent this letter to him, it says, Romelli Janitorial Services, Inc. shall cease the collection of municipal solid waste and recycling from the city of Kenner.
I agree that that's what's in the letter.
Okay. So what does that mean to you?
I'm going to make
The letter, March 3rd, when my client was instructed to cease the collection of municipal solid waste and recycling. What was he supposed to do?
I'm going to object to the form. You are now showing him a letter from the city attorney from March 31st of 2020 asking him to interpret what a letter that he didn't send means. And again, now you're asking him to interpret what a lawyer is saying. It's completely inappropriate. It's exactly what we asked the judge to do, to interpret this, and you're objecting to it. And now you're asking a layperson to interpret it. But subject to that objection, if he knows what Ed Raper meant on March 31st, 2020, then he can answer it, but I'm going to maintain my objection.
And your question was again?
Explain to me the difference between 7.2, termination of my client's contract shall immediately discontinue all service and work. That's what the termination provision says, right? In the contract you executed, right? And now I want you to look at the March 31, 2020 letter from Mr. Rapier where he says, you shall cease collection of municipal solid waste and recycling for the city of Kenner. And I want your understanding, is there any difference between the two?
I'm going to object to the form of the question. And
You-
you are no. It's completely inappropriate. You were asking him to interpret a letter that he didn't write with a
Inappropriate is not an objection,
No, it is.
Matt.
If it-
Go back to law school.
No, don't start that.
I mean, come
You know
on.
what? I'm
You
going to
know,
instruct
you're
him
just-
not to answer the question.
No.
You're harassing him.
I'm
You're
not.
asking him a question. You're asking him to make a legal determination. Let's go ask the judge. You didn't want to do that, Patrick. We were in front of the judge asking him to do that, and you waved your hand for 20 minutes.
You're making speaking objections.
Well, no, but
I've
this is
allowed
what
it
we wanted
all.
the judge
I've
to do.
allowed
You
it
don't
all
wanna do it.
morning.
Now you're asking
not
Mike
entitled
Sigur.
to make speaking
Well,
objections.
you're asking him a question that is
Matt,
completely
do
inappropriate.
you agree with me? You're not entitled to make speaking objections.
I don't have to answer questions today.
Well, no,
I'm going
you're not
to object
entitled
for
to
the
it. Do we
record.
need to get
If
the
you
judge
know
on
the
the line
answer to
for
the
that?
question, if you can sit here and interpret what Ed Raper meant and compare it to a contract that Patrick objected to the judge interpreting, and now he's going to come in here today with the video camera and all the show and ask questions, I'm objecting to it. If you understand the question, you can answer it. If you don't understand, it's fine to say, I can't answer that question.
As phrased, I can't answer it. I'm going to read the letter word for word as you have requested me to look at.
Okay.
The first thing I see is, Dear Mr. Romelli, pursuant to sections 8.1 and 8.2. You're not asking me about that section. You're asking me about section 7.2. That's not referenced in the letter as I read it. So when I go to 8.1, 8.2, it clearly talks about the non-exclusivity and mentions contractor acknowledges and agrees that the rights and obligations conferred and contained herein shall not be exclusive in nature, and the city makes no representation or warranties to the contrary. City reserves the right to contract with other parties for any and all of the work/services contained herein. So those words, these words, I'm not going to give you any kind of opinion on the legality. I'm looking at what you presented me as Exhibit 11, and it clearly directs sections 8.1, 8.2 of a contract, not the 7.2 part of the contract. That's my observation.
Okay. Do you believe that the Romelli contract that you executed in 2016 was terminated by the city of Kenner?
You have to expect an objection to that. I'm going to object. That is that's exactly what we asked the judge to do, and you said it was inappropriate at the time. You're asking him to decide whether or not a contract's been terminated. That's a legal issue in the case.
He's already tested. That was the first thing he said in the
Okay,
deposition.
well,
today.
then why are you asking him again?
Because I'm trying to understand how he can give testimony that the contract wasn't terminated, but yet he can't interpret the provision
just answered your
that
question.
deals with
He
termination.
just answered your question on that. I mean, he just answered the question, and I
it
think
this
he's
way.
already testified he doesn't believe it was terminated. But if you want to ask him again,
You don't believe the city of Kenner terminated Romelli's contract, correct?
same
Correct, that's my understanding.
Did you ever have any conversations, or did any of your constituents disagree with your understanding that the contract wasn't terminated?
I'm not sure how to answer that, because if I, as the councilman who read this, have thoughts, citizens who never even read these things come up with thoughts. They're not apples and apples, they're apples and oranges. So I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they're relying on to make that comment.
So your constituents did tell you they believed the city of Kenner had terminated the
I didn't
contract?
say
Completely
that.
Well, I'm
mischaracterized
asking
his
the
testimony.
question, did they or
I
did
just
they not?
answered it and said I can't say that's what they meant.
I'm not asking if that's what they meant. I'm asking if that's what they told you in writing. Did any of your constituents tell you that?
Check to the form of the question.
I don't know how to answer it.
It's either yes, no, or I don't recall.
I don't recall.
Perfect. Did the mayor of the city of Kenner ever refer to Bob Romelli as the former contractor for the city?
Oh, I don't know. I have no way. If he put in a piece of correspondence to me and said that, I would have to agree with you.
Okay. So if the mayor put it in writing that Mr. Romelli was the former contractor for the city of Kenner, you would agree that he was
that's
terminated?
not what he said. He said if he put it, no, that's not what he said. Read the question back. He
Sure.
forgot if he put it in writing and sent it to me, I would agree. If there was a link, that's what he said.
Perfect.
Ask him that question. Don't
All right.
stop mischaracterizing everything.
I'm just trying to get a clear record.
Well, let's stop. Ask the question.
not
You're
tr-
mischaracterizing his testimony.
So if the mayor put in writing that Mr. Romelli, or let's set it up the question. As we sit here today, it's your understanding in 2021, Romelli is still a contractor for the city of Kenner under the contract you executed?
Yeah.
Okay. At any time prior to today and after May 1st, 2020, did the mayor ever tell you that Romelli was the former contractor? He was no longer under contract with the city of Kenner.
Not to my knowledge.
Have you ever seen any writing where the mayor referred to, after May 1st, 2020, where the mayor referred to Mr. Romelli as the former contractor for the city of Kenner?
I don't think so.
And if the mayor would have referred to Mr. Romelli as the former contractor for the city of Kenner to you in a conversation or in a city council meeting, would you have taken issue and said, Mr. Mayor, you're wrong. Mr. Romelli's still a contractor for us. Contract hadn't been terminated. Did you ever do that?
Object.
Well, you asked at a city council meeting. I don't know that I would do it at a city council meeting, but I would go to my legal staff and say, wait a minute, based on that comment, where are we at?
Did you ever do that?
That's I'm going to object. That's
I don't-
assuming that even happened. Now we're talking hypotheticals. So
Did you ever do that?
Didn't need to.
So the answer is no. Okay.
object. That's assuming that that happened. And he said he doesn't remember that happening.
All right. So is it accurate to say that when someone would raise an issue with the contract you executed, would you go to council, legal department to ask them questions, or would you refer to the contractor to determine that yourself?
No, I wouldn't refer anything myself. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't have any negotiation or any opportunity to insert any language to have any meaning. So yes, I would go to legal.
All right. I'm going to show you what I'm going to mark as Exhibit 12. It's March 4, 2020 email to District 2 Kenner, LA. That's your email address for the city of Kenner? Mm-hmm. So you would have received this?
Sure.
Ann Mushia, do you know her?
I recognize the name. I probably maybe have had conversations. I return every phone call that I get from residents and talk to them on their concerns. So it's quite possible I have spoken to her, but I cannot recall distinctly.
It says, I see no reason to cancel the contract with Romelli. Why leave the city open for a possible lawsuit? Romelli has been doing an excellent job as far as my collections are concerned. Thanks for the street repair. So when your council member in March of 2020 wrote you saying, I don't see to cancel the contract, did you go look at the contract to see whether or not what the city was doing was canceling the contract?
Well, she's writing in there she sees no reason to cancel the contract. I can't ascertain where she's getting the information that we canceled. To my knowledge, we never canceled. So I don't have any rational belief that she understood what canceling meant. But I'm not speaking for her. I'm only speaking for what I read. I know we didn't cancel the contract, so I don't have...
Great. How do you know you didn't cancel the contract?
Objection on it.
That's-
At some point, I'm going to have to say he can't. I mean, how many times you can ask him?
How do you know it? What's the basis for that statement?
Same objection.
I have nothing in front of me that has said the mayor canceled the contract. I have nothing that you've shown me or I can recall that says he canceled.
Gotcha. So that's what you need to see. You need to see something in writing from the mayor saying the contract's canceled,
Object
to believe it was canceled.
Same objection.
The mayor, as I know from my time as mayor, has powers. The mayor itself, as I would appreciate, can instruct legal to do the necessary things to invoke if he chooses to cancel a contract. I don't think the mayor just says, we cancel, get out of here, and it ends it. It has to follow a legal process because it's a legal document that invoked it.
Sue Stein, do you know Sue Stein? Is she a constituent of yours?
Offhand, I don't know first name.
I'll show you document mark Exhibit 13. Another email from March 4th, 2020. Rayline is Ramelli garbage contract. Mr. Sigur, I'm writing this email to you concerning the cancellation of the Ramelli garbage contract. Did you write Ms. Stein back and tell her she was wrong that the contract hadn't been canceled?
Okay, well, first observation, her address is 5312 Craig Avenue. That's not in my council district.
But she sent this to you?
She sent it to District 2, KennerLA.us, which is my district email address, so yes.
Do you recall whether you wrote Ms. Stein back and informed her that the city wasn't canceling the Ramelli garbage contract?
I cannot recall if I did.
Okay. Goes on to say, my opinion is simple. The city of Kenner needs to honor the remaining 6 years of its contract with Ramelli. It's the ethical thing to do. To do anything else is bad business practice, which will reflect negatively on both the city administration and the city council. I respectfully ask you to vote against the cancellation of the Ramelli contract.
I appreciate her words, but I never voted to cancel a contract because it was never put before us. And again, is Ms. Stein an attorney?
No, but Steve Pettit, do you know who he is? He's an attorney, right?
Yes. I know.
He wrote you too about the contract, about
Sure.
your city canceling the contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wrote you on March 5th. He actually wrote the whole city council, right?
That's what it says.
And the Rayline is Ramelli contract. He says, council members, I'm going to mark this as Exhibit 14. If you have not read the Ramelli contract in its entirety, now, had you read the Ramelli contract in its entirety as of March 5, 2020?
I'm sure I did.
Okay. I strongly suggest that you do so before the meeting tonight. What I have read of the city's position in local media is concerningly void of the entire picture of liability on the part of the city. Please pay special attention to Section 7.2E and the paragraphs which follow, and Section 8.26 regarding the city's exposure to pay the legal fees of Ramelli if it were to initiate litigation and be successful. Do you recall this email from Mr. Pettit?
It was sent to my district, so I'm sure I got it and read it, but do I? Okay.
And did you said you had read the whole contract, right? He is specifically referring you to Section 7.2E, which happens to be the same termination provision we had been discussing for the last half hour or so. Do you recall whether or not you reviewed 7.2E back in March of 2020?
You just asked me if I read the whole contract, and I believe I said I had, and is that not in the contract?
Yes, sir.
Then I guess I...
So what was your understanding of 7.2E when you read it back in March of 2020?
How many times are we going to do this? You're asking, it's the exact same thing that we just did. Now you're showing him, whoever Steve Pettit is, I'm sure he's friends with Mr. Ramelli and helping him out.
It's a speaking objection.
But you're asking, we're going to be here all day asking the same question.
I've got an email from someone to him saying, read this provision. He just testified he read it. Now I'm asking him what he recalls from that. That is perfectly
You asked him that 10 minutes
appropriate.
ago, and we did the same thing 10 minutes ago. He's already told you. It's an improper...
Object to the form, and then
But you're asking for a
reserve
legal
your
conclusion.
objection.
You're continuing to ask the same thing. Now you're just changing it with a letter from Mr. Ramelli's friend, Steve Pettit, making a bunch of comments about sections that we just talked about. So I guess we will be here all day, but at some point it's got to end. He's already told you, and we all talked about it. You've just talked about the same exact provision, did we not?
We have not seen this email before.
How does that change anything that he just said? How does that change anything that he just said? It doesn't. It's the same
You got to
question.
stop with the speaking objections, man.
I'm arguing with you. I'm not objecting. At this point,
You
we're just
can't
talking.
argue on a deposition. Reserve. I'm entitled to ask this witness about this email.
But you're not asking about the email, Patrick. You're asking
Stop.
about 7.2E.
Stop. Now you're talking circular. Connie, will you read back? Will you read back the
You just said you're talking
question?
about the email. Ask him about the email.
Will
Don't
you-
ask him about 7.2E. You've already done that. That's two different things. Ask him about the email. That's what you said you were doing.
What did you do after you received
There
Exhibit
we go.
14 from Mr. Pettit?
I presume I read it.
I'm sorry.
I would presume I read it because I read all my emails.
And was your testimony 2 minutes ago not that you read the contract as well?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you recall? Do you recall what your understanding was back when Mr. Pettit wrote you in March of 2020 saying read 7.2E?
Same objection.
Do you recall what you
Recall.
understood when you read it?
I understood that I'm receiving an email from Steve Pettit at Pettit Law Firm. He's an attorney. He's not a city attorney. So his opinion on what he thinks the contract says is his opinion. At this time, since I'm a authorized city councilman, I yield to my city attorney's opinions more than I do other attorney opinions. And we all understand that's why we got a bunch of attorneys around us. They all have opinions. But the law is the law based on the contract, and I will yield to the contract and where it's going because Mr. Pettit only points out what I've said earlier. Pay special attention to 7.2E and 8.26, which supports the 7.2E conclusion if that is what was followed. He doesn't mention the 8.1. Why? I don't know. But if he read 8.1, then it would clearly have acknowledged that the city, the contractor, acknowledges and agrees that the rights and obligations conferred and contained herein shall be non-exclusive in nature. And city makes no representations or warranties to the contrary. City reserves the right to contract with other parties for any and all work services contained therein. He doesn't reference that. I don't know why. I don't question him. I only speak to city attorneys on questions of a legal contract that is invoked by the city of Kenner.
So did you go to the city attorney in March 5th after you got that email and ask him about this provision, 7.2E?
Time-wise, you're asking me, did I go to him after this point? I don't recall, but I know in the general flow of time, I was under the understanding that 8.1 allowed the city to have multiple waste contractors under contract. The fact that nothing was ever presented to me relative to 7.2, what was it, 7.2, that a contract with a waste provider that we had under contract was being canceled. So there was no discussion no need to have a discussion on cancellation of a contract. If we're just evoking the 8.1 non-exclusive paragraph, which says the city reserves the right to contract with other parties for any and all work/services contained within. So if I look at the date, March 5th, 2020, which you pointed out earlier was the date, or I don't know if this was the exact date that the council was voting on it, a new contract with a new contractor, that's what he's referencing. But he doesn't mention it. 8.1 is what we were doing.
So do I understand your testimony to be that after Mr. Pettit pointed out section 7.2E to you in this email, you did not go speak to the city department or anybody else concerning 7.2E?
Just the form of the question.
Specifically, I cannot recall, but I will say that I already understood what 8.1 allowed.
And so you understood on May 1, 2020, Romelli was still a contractor for the city of Kenner under this contract you executed?
Sure, and I still believe he's still under contract.
It's probably a good breaking point.
Yeah.
We're now off the record. The time is 10:17.
We'll go to
We're now returning to the record. It is 10:34.
Mr. Sigur, back to the 2016 contract that you executed. What do you understand? You read it before the break. Section 8.1 non-exclusivity to mean.
objection asked and answered, and legal interpretation. Subject to my objection.
I understand it to mean the city contractor acknowledges and agrees that the rights and obligations conferred and contained herein shall be non-exclusive in nature, and the city makes no representations or warranties to the contrary. The city reserves the right to contract with other parties for any and all of the work/services contained herein.
So you read the provision.
I read it, and that's what I believe it means.
So you believe it to mean what it reads?
That's
Fair enough.
what I'm answering.
Okay. So, given that you are of the opinion that the contract is still in place today with Ramelli, I have some questions for you.
Okay.
How many rollout carts is Ramelli required to have on hand for this contract today? You can look at section A2, 3.A.2, which is page 8. First provision says contractors shall be solely responsible for the purchase, storage, and distribution of all rollout carts for service units.
Okay. But
So how many rollout carts does Mr. Ramelli required to store right now to honor this contract that you contend still in place?
I don't know, is there a number somewhere in here that specifies that? I don't
Yeah,
know.
6.7.
6.7?
That's on page 40 of 56. It says the city and the contractor mutually agree that the initial number of service units receiving solid waste and recyclable material collection is established at 22,000.
Okay. Then I would assume it means he should have 22,000.
Okay, so you're understanding that because this contract's in place, Mr. Ramelli needs to have 22,000 garbage rollout carts in storage to perform under this contract if asked to do so by the city of Kenner.
Same objection.
You've inserted some words that I'm going to just refer back to the sentence. It says city and contractor mutually agree that the initial number of service units receiving solid waste and recycled material collection is established at 22,000. Your question, as I recall, was in storage. I don't know what he does with them.
Okay. Well, what do you understand? How many service units do you understand the city of Kenner is asking Mr. Ramelli today, 2021, to service under the contract?
22,000.
The city's asking Mr. Ramelli to do that today?
No.
Object to the form of the question.
You insert words that each sentence might mean something different to me, and I'm trying to keep up with these insertions. Service, you just inserted. The city and contractor mutually agree that the initial number of service units receiving solid waste and recyclable materials collection is established at 22,000. You inserted this last question, how many units does he need to service? I don't know that 22,000 units are for service or just what he needs to have an inventory of.
So is it your understanding that Mr. Ramelli needs to have 22,000 rollout carts today to service this contract if the city were to ask him to resume services to the units?
Object to the form of the question. It calls for a legal interpretation. It's better off for a 1442 deposition of the city of Kenner, and you're asking him to interpret a 56-page contract, but subject to my objection, if you know.
Well, again, I'm just relate to, I asked you For this section, which you pointed out, where a number of 22,000 is in there, but it refers to service units, doesn't say servicing, so I don't interpret
All right.
the word service.
So as you sit here today, you can't tell me how many rollout cards Ramelli is to store to honor this contract?
Again, I've read it, but I will, at this point, yield to my legal attorneys to tell me that, because you're asking me a question that I don't understand.
Okay. Page 27, section 5 point section. Page 27, 5.7. It's this last section, collection equipment requirements for service/work. It says, in order to provide service/work under this contract, contractor shall provide a sufficient number of vehicles for regular collection services. In 2021, how many vehicles does Ramelli need to have to service this contract?
Again, is that,
It's the same objection. This is,
Okay, you can object.
I mean, it's okay not to know. You know, I mean, this is completely out of the realm of him as a fact witness. I mean, he was the mayor that signed. We thought we were here today to answer questions about what facts he knows. Now you're asking him to interpret.
Interpret the contract he executed.
But you're asking about today. There's a new mayor and a new government in place to interpret that. If you wanted to do that, you should have sent a 1442 notice with these issues. No,
you
but you know
stop?
that's the proper way to do
No,
it. But,
you're wrong.
But it's okay.
You're
No,
wrong.
I'm not wrong. I'm
Well,
not wrong.
Make your objection and let
And
us
if you don't know,
proceed.
Mr. Sigur, it's okay not to know. Way beyond the facts that you know.
what was your question again?
How many vehicles does he need to maintain today to service this contract that's you contend is still in place with the city of Kenner?
Same objection. It calls for an opinion.
Again, I do not know. If that's,
Okay, fair enough. How many workers does he need to have ready to service this contract for the city of Kenner?
Same objection.
I do not know.
How much insurance, does the city expect Mr. Ramelli to maintain insurance that's required under this contract?
Same objection.
I do not know.
What about a bond? Is Ramelli required to provide a bond
Same
under this
objection.
contract?
Same objection.
I do not know.
Okay. What about payments to Ramelli? Is the city obligated to pay Mr. Ramelli anything in 2021 for this contract?
Same objection.
I do not know.
All right, I want to ask you some questions back, going back to 2019. Do you recall the nationwide problem with recycling?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. I mean, I got prior to 16, I received numerous requests for residents who wanted to have recycling brought back, which they lost after Katrina. So I don't know what reference nationwide problem you're referring to.
Okay. I'm going to show you what I'm going to mark as Exhibit 15. Which is a May 10, 2019 email from Ben Zahn regarding Ramelli recycling in Kenner. I should take a look at that.
Which number? 17?
15. Subject is Ramelli recycling in Kenner. I noticed the first person on the to list is council office. Does that get distributed to all the council members?
Yes,
So you would have received this email in May of 19?
should have.
It says, council members and chief, we have been made aware of what's shaping up to be an issue nationwide with recycling programs. A change in the environmental law in China is impacting many of our country's curbside recycling programs and even those in the local communities here in Jefferson Parish and throughout the New Orleans metropolitan area. Do you recall this at all, the problems in 2019?
I probably saw news stories that might have mentioned China having problems with recyclable items, but I don't know that, I'm not sure I understood how that completely impacted us in Kenner.
Well, in the middle of this email from the mayor to you and others, it says, the result is no collection company will have any local outlet to dispose of recyclables. Did you understand that in May of 2019, collection companies didn't have a place to locally dispose of recycling? Do you recall that?
Again, I see it in this, so if I read this, then I understood the result is no collection company will have a local outlet. Local meaning City of Kenner.
It goes on to say, presently only one site in Baton Rouge may accept the material, but if so, the cost could be very costly. Do you recall any conversations about that?
As I see this sentence, it says, right, that apparently there may be a site in Baton Rouge that may accept material, and it could be costly, I guess, presuming that their cost to take it in is higher than somebody else locally, if we had one.
As a result of those problems, do you remember whether or not the City of Kenner instructed its residents to not stop recycling certain materials and only to recycle aluminum, tin, and plastic?
Okay.
Do you recall that?
Well, as we're reading this, and I'm recalling, that's what the mayor put out in this release, that I accept that aluminum and tin and plastic, but it seems like we also collect newspaper, cardboard. So I don't know how to interpret that, because we still accept cardboard, newspaper. So.
Yeah, okay, I'm not asking you about today. I'm asking you back in 19. Do you have any recollection of the City of Kenner telling residents, don't recycle everything, only recycle this because of these problems?
Well, and that's what I'm trying to explain. I don't recall even then that we said, stop doing cardboard and paper, but I'm reading the sentence where it says aluminum, tin, plastic. So I'm not sure what happened to the newspaper, cardboard collection. It, to my knowledge, was never cut back.
Okay, so you don't recall it being cut back.
Okay.
Fair enough. After this, do you recall discussions with Romelli regarding amending its contract for recycling?
I have no knowledge of amending the contract. That would be through the legal service.
Well, do you recall an ordinance where you authorized an amendment to Romelli's contract for recycling?
I do vaguely recall we took up, trying to remember what the nature of it was, though. I vaguely recall we did something, but I don't know the details.
Okay. Do you recall meeting with the mayor and other council members on this in December of 19?
Again,
I'll show you one of them more. It's Exhibit 16. These are a series of invitations from the mayor to council members that were produced in this litigation. Looks like you accepted.
Oh, okay. Well, this one, if you're, go ahead.
Well, do you recall meeting at
Well,
Chateau Cafe?
Yes.
All right. What do you recall about that meeting?
A discussion on various topics for garbage pickup and recycling.
What topics in particular?
As I recall, we had discussions on the recycling, and we also had discussions on the setup of a trash drop-off location in the city.
Okay.
Trash meaning woody waste, branches, larger items than what would go in a garbage truck.
And who do you recall meeting with? Did you meet with Mr. Romelli to talk about this, or was this just City of Kenner?
If I recall, he was there.
And who else was there?
Mayor, council members, I'm a little vague. I see Brennan accepted, but I don't know if he was one of the ones there. I think Nikki Nicolosi. Might have, I don't know if there was a city attorney representative there. Again, I just don't recall each and every person that was there.
Okay. And do you recall what came of that meeting in December of 19?
Well, obviously the recycling concern was discussed. The details of what was worked out. We clearly wanted to continue with recycling, so we would do what we perhaps had to do or needed to do to continue offering recycling, but with some limitations. And then the discussion of a drop-off site was promised by Mr. Romelli.
And what do you recall Mr. Romelli promising with respect to a drop-off site?
To do what if I'm trying to recall, he had some type of ramp device or something that he would install for the use of the site.
And where was the site to be located?
At the end of 24th Street, the west end of 24th Street, which used to be in the area of an old sewer plant that we had some vacant ground on.
So is that the location of where IV Waste built a drop site?
Yes.
All right. So in December of 19, Mr. Romelli said he would build it?
Yes.
Okay. At that meeting?
That's what I recall.
All right. And was it discussed that the city was going to pay the cost for recycling were going to increase?
Yeah, but I don't, I want to say yeah, but I don't know what it was.
Okay. Let's see if this helps you. I'm going to show you what's going to mark as Exhibit 17, which is ordinance number 11666. And it's dated December 20, 2019, so about 2 weeks after that meeting, or a week after that meeting. Okay. What is Exhibit 17?
It's an ordinance that was put up and discussed and voted on to, trying to make sense of it. It was to, where is it? To raise or well, whereas says, in order to maintain curbside recycling, it is necessary to charge $2.52 per month. seem to recall there was some discussion that there was some authorized amount, but it had not been collected by the city. So we were now invoking that necessary need to collect that authorized amount.
Okay, so you all were authorizing the mayor to increase the recycling payment to Ramelli to $1.90 per dwelling, is that?
That's what I see in here, yes.
I don't see anything in here about the drop-off site.
I agree.
Did that ever come up before
Well,
the council?
around this time, or I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, with respect to Ramelli, he said he would do it. Did that ever get voted on by the council?
Well, I don't know that it needed a vote. I understood that he was going to do it. I don't know that it needed a vote of the council.
Who owned the property that the drop site was going to be built on?
I suspect the city. I mean, I don't know ownership of every property.
So what would Mr. Ramelli need to do to be able to build a drop site on city property?
Work it out with the administration and legal to set up a site under the conditions that was agreed upon.
Okay. Are you aware of any notice to proceed to Ramelli to build a drop
I
site?
do not know.
I show you what I'm going to mark. This was produced to us from your office. I mean, from the city of Kenner. There's an amendment 1 to the contract with Ramelli. Have you ever? I'm also going to show you what I'm going to mark as Exhibit 19, which is it. February 21, 2020 agenda for a city council meeting. Specifically, item 15A on this agenda on Exhibit 19. This is summary ordinance number 12661, an ordinance approving amendment number 1 to the contract between the City of Kenner and Ramelli Janitorial Service for garbage collection and recycling service. And you were the one that brought the motion,
Yes.
and it was approved. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Well, it's my I don't see the legislation. Do you have?
I don't have the legislation, I just have the ordinance.
Okay, well,
I mean, the agenda.
right. But I don't know what that specific ordinance entailed.
Gotcha. So explain that process to me. There would be an agenda, it'd be called for at the meeting, you'd make a motion, it would be approved. What's the next step in the process?
Well, let me back up. The first step is, in most cases, the administration presents a agenda item. That agenda item is in the form of a motion. Excuse me one second. It's an item that the administration wants the council to look at and take action on. When we get that agenda, it will have the ordinance or resolution attached, and then it'll sit on the council agenda. If it's a resolution, we have 2 council meetings a month. The Monday before the council meeting, there's a cutoff for submitting agenda items. 12 noon. We see that agenda by mid-afternoon. Anything that's on the agenda, this is not, this is the agenda, but this is the after-meeting final. It doesn't, the agenda that we get will just have the caption, it don't have the green section.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But then further attached is the actual material relative to that item, the ordinance, any backup paperwork or whatever to support it. If it's a resolution, which is not if approved, not a fact of law, it can be heard at the council meeting of that week. If it's something that is in the ordinance form, it then lays over 2 weeks to the next council meeting. And the whole time, that ordinance and all the corresponding paperwork are also on the city's website for anybody to review. Then on that meeting, as we go through the agenda and that item comes up, whichever item it is, there will be sometimes discussion, sometimes not, and then it gets voted on. After it's voted on, it is assigned the ordinance number, and the clerk of the council advertises the passage of these items in the official newspaper or whatever, and then after so many days of that, then they become an actual approved passed ordinance.
Okay, so this agenda that we're looking at, Exhibit 19, would have been generated after the meeting, after you've made the motion and it was approved. Is that accurate?
Not sure the way you phrased it. This paper you've provided me to look at is the agenda of the February 21st, 2020 meeting, but since it has the inserted green text, is published after the meeting.
Exactly. Okay. That's all I was trying to get clarification on. So Exhibit 19 would have been generated after the city council had already approved the amendment to Romelli's contract, which is in 15A.
Yes.
Approve the ordinance authorizing the amendment.
Right.
Is that right?
This heading says ordinance number 12, which is added after it's approved, and ordinance approving amendment number 1, and I don't know what the language of amendment 1 was.
Well, Exhibit 18.
Well, this is a document that you presented me that you've labeled as Exhibit 18 that refers to an amendment, but there's nothing in here that says this is what was attached to this.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I don't know what to say that this is that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It's got the same reference, and it was produced by the city of Kenner, but you're not sure if it's what that was.
Correct.
Fair enough. After you approved on the February 21st, 2020 council meeting, do you know whether the city of Kenner ever executed amendment number 1 to Romelli's contract?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, once we approve it, it goes to the administration, legal.
Now, do you know whether or not Romelli was ever paid for recycling at that higher rate of $1.90 that we saw in the ordinance?
I would take the belief if he billed for it, it was paid.
But you don't know whether the city ever signed the amendment to the contract?
No. I guess you're kind of referring to this paper, but I don't know. I don't see any signature spaces on here to know if there was a place to sign off at.
Now, when this came before the council on February 21, you were already aware that the administration was moving forward with IV waste at that time.
Rephrase that again?
When you filed a motion, when you made a motion to amend Mr. Romelli's contract, you were aware, were you not, that the administration had already decided to move forward replacing Mr. Romelli with IV Waste.
Object to the form of the question, mischaracterizes the facts, subject to the objection.
Well, that's interesting. No, I don't know that I did because we didn't see the, well, let me back up a second. On the Exhibit 11, which is dated March 31st, 2020, which is a letter signed by Mr. Rapier, city attorney, which we had already discussed pursuant to sections 8.1, 8.2, the last sentence says, this is a stop work notification, not a canceling or termination of the contract. That would have been a first indication of what took place to send a stop work notification.
Okay, I wasn't asking about a stop work
Well,
notification.
but you were asking me something that inferred we did something to stop the work prior to February.
Well, prior to February 21st, 2020, you had met with Sidney Torres, right?
I don't remember the date. I don't know what it was.
But-
Give me a date.
You did meet with him, right?
Yes,
How many occasions?
once.
And where was that?
At his operation office, Tulane or something. I don't know.
So how did you come about meeting Mr. Torres?
Was invited as a council member to go tour his location along with some citizens of the city to see how they operate.
And who invited you?
I think that came from the mayor,
Okay, tell me about that. What do you recall?
just that we were invited to go see his operation. We went there, he toured us his operation, answered questions that may have been asked by any of the participants, and we left.
And when do you recall that was?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall who was at the tour with you? You said,
Well, I would, mayor, council members, I'm not sure.
Councilmember Carroll?
Trying to refresh my memory to think if I recall seeing him there. I can't say that I did, but it's as well over a year ago. I'm trying to recall that. Myself, Councilman Brannigan, as I said, there was some civic association representatives.
Do you recall who?
No.
Bob Bales, was he there?
I actually don't really know Mr. Bales. I know of him, but to say if I walked in front of him today, I would recognize him, I don't know that because it's not.
Okay. As far as the council members, you recall Mr. Brannigan there?
Miss Burning. Is it Mr. Burning? Okay.
Yeah, that's,
Any other council members when you toured the IV Waste facility? And if you, I'm not,
that's what I said.
that's
I'm
fine. I'm just trying to
recall.
understand what you recall. And I'm not trying to pressure you. I'm just, if you, were there, you recall one or you recall more, you just can't remember who?
There might have been more than Brannigan, I just don't recall.
Okay. And how many people from the civic associations do you recall?
Four or five,
Okay.
I don't know specifically.
All right. And besides the mayor, anyone else from the administration?
City attorneys,
Mr. Rapier?
I recall.
All right. Anyone else? Was Ms. Roussel?
Probably. Okay. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't recall.
That's fine. Do you recall anybody else?
Other than Mr. Torres' staff.
And who on Mr. Torres' staff?
Well, he introduced us to a variety of people. I don't recall all their names.
Okay. Was Nikki Nicolosi there?
I want to say probably, but I mean, you asked me to give you a yes or no, but I don't want to say yes or no if I don't recall. So
You said probably.
I don't recall.
You had been made aware when you visited the IV waste facility with the mayor and Mr. Rapier and other civic members that Mr. Nicolosi was no longer working for my client, right? You'd been made aware of that?
I received correspondence from Mr. Romelli stating that he no longer worked for him. I don't recall the date of that letter in relation to the date that we took the tour.
Show you the email. Actually, I'm going to show you the email where it's dated February 6, 2020, where Mr. Romelli writes you to tell you that Nikki's no longer working for him, and where you send that to Mr. Nicolosi. Take a look at that. I want to ask you some questions about it. I guess my first question is, why are you sending this letter to Mr. Nicolosi?
Because after I received it, I was concerned. I didn't know what was going on. So I called to ask him, what was this about? And his answer was, I don't know. Send me a copy of it.
Okay, so you called Mr. Nicolosi after this? After receiving this?
Upon receiving it, was not understanding what was going on, because he had been our assigned rep. So I called him to ask him. And as I said, he says, I don't know. I've never seen it. Send me a copy of it.
And you sent it to him?
Yes.
And did I assume you had conversations with him after about it?
Not specifically, other than at some point, I'm sure in a conversation with him, he said, yeah, I guess I'm no longer working there.
Did Mr. Nicolosi tell you that? Yeah. How did you come to the understanding that Nikki Nicolosi was Mr. Romelli's rep?
When I told you earlier in this meeting, when I came on to the council and would be receiving complaints on issues relative to garbage, and I asked who do we contact, it was told Mr. Nicolosi.
Did Mr. Nicolosi, when you sent him this letter, he told you he didn't know anything about it, correct?
That's what he told me.
Yeah. Did he inform you that he had actually quit a couple of weeks before that?
That's not how I interpret it.
Well, he didn't tell you that.
That's right. I mean, he told me he didn't know what I was talking about
Okay.
when I told him of receiving this letter.
All right. And then sometime before March 5th, you have a tour of IV's facility, and you think Mr. Nicolosi was maybe there, maybe not.
Well, did we establish the date that we took the tour? I don't.
No. Well, March 5th is when you approved the contract with
Oh,
Ivy
okay.
Waste. So I assume you
Okay.
went to his facility before March 5th,
Yes,
right?
Okay.
Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And seeing Exhibit 20, does that refresh your recollection at all as to whether or not Mr. Nicolosi was at the IV Waste facility when you toured it?
I won't, no, I don't think it gives me any further recollection, but I'm still trying to picture and go through faces that I recall being there.
When you approved the contract, well, were you aware when you received this in February 5th or 6th of 2020, were you aware that Mr. Rapier was already in negotiations with IV Waste for a new contract?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Were you aware that the administration had already met with IV Waste?
Not firsthand, no.
All right, so when the mayor called you to go look at the IV Waste facility, what did you understand the purpose of that was?
To go tour their site to show us what his services look like. For a matter of record, we went to other sites.
What other sites did you go to?
Waste Pro?
Anything else? Any other sites?
No.
Okay. Why did you understand you were going and taking tours of other competitors of Ramelli, let's just say?
See how they operate.
Were you under the understanding that the administration wanted to find a new contractor
Check to the form of the question.
or an additional contractor? I'm not.
Again, when I go back to the contract that was signed, 8.1, if the mayor desired to have additional contracts, and in doing so, he invited me and others to go see others, I'm like, okay, I'll take that as part of my research to look at other people. Then when you, which we now know on March 5th presented us with another contract, I now have working knowledge of how that company operates.
Did the mayor express to you? I'm just trying to understand. February 21st, you're approving an amendment to his contract, and in that same month, you're going to look at IV Waste facility, and a couple weeks later, you're approving a contract with IV. How did that come about?
Check to the form of the question. I don't know what you mean by what.
I don't know, right, I don't know.
You don't know.
I said that, but I also understood, where's the problem? We could do that.
Did the mayor tell you before this February 21st, 2020 meeting where you approved the amendment to Ramelli's contract for recycling? Did he inform you that he had already told Mr. Ramelli that he was replacing him?
No?
He never told you that?
No.
Did you have any discussions with anyone in the administration regarding the meeting where the mayor told Mr. Ramelli he was replacing him?
Not to my knowledge.
So today is the first time you're learning from my questioning that Mr. Ramelli met with the mayor before February 21st, 2020, where the mayor told him he was being replaced?
That's what you're saying, yeah. I mean,
Fair
because the
enough.
first that I heard of it was March 31st.
I'm going to show you. Copy. I'm going to number it Exhibit 21, which is an ordinance. 11718. On your motion, it's dated March 5, 2020. What is this?
It's an ordinance approving a contract with IV Waste LLC for the collection and transportation of garbage or trash within the corporate limits of the city of Kenner, Louisiana for a period of 10 years and providing for related matters.
And so why did you make this motion?
As a council member, we get a request from the council president prior to a council meeting as to who wishes to motion or second anything on the agenda. And we send in, yeah, okay, I'll do this one, yeah, okay, I'll do that one, just to get things moving. Somebody has to motion second to get it on the floor for discussion.
Okay. And prior to this council meeting, had the administration circulated a proposed contract that the administration wanted to enter into with IV Waste?
I'm sorry, rephrase that again?
Before the March 5th, 2020 meeting,
Yes.
you would have been presented
Right.
a draft contract?
Because it has to show up so many days ahead before it's voted on a filing. So at that point, we see the contract.
I'm going to show you what I'm going to mark as Exhibit 22. Unsigned contract. And I'm not going to represent to you that this was executed. If you look at the footer at the bottom right, it's dated February 18, 2020.
Okay.
Do you recognize this to be the contract that was presented to the council at that March 5 meeting, or before, as you said, to review?
That's a question that I can't just say without going through and comparing word for word what I know was on the agenda attached to the ordinance.
Okay. Why don't you turn to page 31? That might help refresh your recollection. It says services for collection, service fees for collection services. It says for the service/work, city shall pay contractor for the service work performed on and subsequent to the initial collection date, the sum of $12 and $32,100 per service unit per month. Do you recall at that March 5, 2020 council meeting, the administration was proposing to enter into a contract to pay IV Waste $12.32 per service unit per month?
I think that was what I understood, because, again, I don't know, these footers, I don't know where that comes from. Whoever wrote this up must put that on there. But what was attached to the agenda on the first filing date is the only one that I can say from that point forward I referenced
Fair
for
enough.
any discussions.
So I can go back and find whatever that contract was attached to that prior agenda, but and I'll do that. But I will. You do recall that March 5th, 2020 council meeting, right? Mr. O'Malley was there. A lot of people were there. A lot of people talked.
Sure.
You remember the issue coming up as to whether or not Mr. O'Malley was being paid $12.32 a service unit? Do you
Yes.
recall that?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you recall about that?
The question was whether he was being paid or whether we were paying that to Romelli, to the IV contract, was this is the dollar amount that was being presented to us to pay IV. Obviously, in the discussion, the question was, Mr. Romelli proclaimed he was not being paid that much. So certainly some residents picking up and keying on that said that we were increasing the cost of the contract.
And at that March 5th meeting, what was your understanding that was the contract with IV Waste supposed to be the same price as the Romelli contract, or was it supposed to be more?
My understanding is the price that we would pay IV is what was warranted under the Romelli contract. There was a difference because Mr. Romelli failed to bill for the CPI indexes.
Okay.
So this contract would put those in there.
Fair enough. So you understand that Mr. Romelli failed to bill for all the CPI increases that he was allowed to under his contract?
Yes.
How did you come to that understanding?
Questioning when I saw the dollar amount here as to what he was billing and why there was a difference if we were intending to pay the same.
So who did you speak with in the administration concerning Mr. Romelli's failure to bill for everything he was entitled to under his contract?
Well, okay. In that discussion, trying to follow through with where this number came from.
You're talking about $12.32?
Right.
Okay.
Is where I was told that in his contract, he had a base starting dollar amount, and then the CPI increases over each year's. That if you took those CPI indexes and applied them, this is what he could have billed for.
$12.32.
Right.
All right. Who told you that? Did you do the math, or did somebody in the administration do the math?
Well, I mean, I didn't exactly do the math. I asked questions and got information from the administration relative to what was the CPI. I don't offhand know what the CPI index is for each year. As I recall, I was provided a number amount for each of the years, and then I take the base dollar amount and add them and got to this number.
Okay. My question is, who with the administration told you that Romelli hadn't billed for all of the CPI he was entitled to under his contract?
Well, that's a specific question, and I'm trying to specifically, it could have come through the city attorney's office, because if I ask a question more on the contract at that time, that's where I would have directed it.
Other than conversations with the city attorney's office, do you recall anyone else with the administration telling you that let's be specific, do you recall Deborah Foshi telling you that Mr. Romelli hadn't been billing for all of the CPI he was entitled to under his contract?
She clearly articulated that at the meeting on March 5th.
So you recall on the March 5th meeting.
No, you asked me what Ms. Foshi said.
Right, you just said she said this on March 5th.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So you recall at the March 5th council meeting that Ms. Foshi told the public that Mr. Romelli hadn't been billing for everything he was entitled to under the contract?
Correct.
All right. I think that might have been disclosed at a later council meeting, but I'm not trying to change your recollection. I'm just trying to prevent you from
I recall it coming up at
mixing them.
that vote on that meeting, why there was an indication that this dollar amount was higher than what he, and then I try to put it in perspective. He should have been billing, but he chose or whatever not to. So this is what we would have been paying had he chose to do so. So any discussion of inserting a price to pay a new entity was based on what his contract allowed him to be paid.
Besides Ms. Foshi saying that at a council meeting, do you have any other conversations with any Kenner administration, Mr. Wetzel or anyone else concerning whether or not Mr. Romelli was entitled to bill for more than he did under his contract?
In my review of this contract and asking why this number was there, and understanding just from a citizens are very good at pointing out what they think are issues. So it's incumbent that we listen and also do our own research to determine. So based upon just a hearing of, oh, we're paying more to Ivy than we paid Romelli, caused me to ask questions. Those questions were, where did this number come from? Now, based on the information I received from probably Wetzel as our CFO, who I would go to also to ask for monetary questions, city attorney's office, and then Ms. Foshi, but if you're inferring that she didn't say it at the March 5th meeting, well, I remembered, but if it wasn't then I don't know where to say I got it.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm not trying to pin you down to a specific date. I'm just trying to,
Well,
as you
it's
sit here today, you understand Romelli didn't bill everything he was entitled to under his contract.
Check the form of the question.
I'm sorry?
As you sit here today, do you understand that Romelli had not, when you were coming up and approving these IV waste contracts, because there were several, right? You recall several IV waste contracts?
One contract, we may have had 2 votes.
Okay. Well, when you had the 2 votes, you recall at that time coming to the understanding through conversations with the administration that Mr. Romelli hadn't billed for all the CPI he was entitled to under his contract.
That was my understanding.
Are you aware that Mr. Romelli did submit a bill for the unbilled CPI?
When?
June 25th. I'll show you one of my markers, Exhibit 23. This was an invoice dated June 25, 2020 from Mr. Romelli for $204,481.18. Were you aware that he had submitted this bill to the city?
Is the date correct? Because wouldn't June 25th, 2020 have been after he was March 1st?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So did he bill us after this stop work notification was issued? I guess that's what you're, I mean, I'm reading
Yeah.
the date, but is that what you're implying?
That's a fair point. So you understood after Mr. Romelli was told to stop work that he could no longer submit bills to the city?
No,
Check
because
the
he
form
does
of the
still.
question. It's a complete mischaracterization.
Okay,
It's not all
so
he said.
what is the
It's actually
significance of
dates.
the invoice on June 25th after the stop work order? What's the significance there?
Well, I guess he realized he could catch up and get paid.
Okay, so were you, my first question was were you aware he has submitted this bill over a
No.
year ago? In June of 2020?
Just now you're showing me this invoice, so now I'm aware that on June 25th, he prepared an invoice and submitted it.
Okay. Do you know if the administration has paid this invoice or not?
Well, I believe so.
You believe so? Who told you so?
Well, I don't know that someone specifically told me. I think I read a newspaper article on a previous litigation where we agreed to pay a fee that he said we owed.
Okay. We'll get to that.
But don't guess. I mean, you're
You
looking
did-
at me.
right.
No,
You
I'm
did-
guessing because you're asking me a specific on who told me, and I'm going, well, I
Well-
don't know that someone told me. I probably read this story.
All right, well, you did prepare for your deposition today by reading the petition, right?
Sure.
And you saw in that, I'm gonna label it exhibit number 24. You saw in there that Mr. Romelli's company has filed a claim for not being paid the CPI that he billed the city for, right? Give copies to everybody. I'm sure you have more of those than you want. Exhibit 24. When you read this, paragraph 115, page 21. It says, based on the city's numerous admissions that Romelli erroneously undercharged the city for CPI increases, Romelli seeks payment of CPI increases due under the contract. Based upon the city's own CPI calculations, Romelli is entitled to $204,481.18 for CPI increases due in 17, 18, 19, and 20. See calculation of CPI adjustments attached here too. Romelli has demand upon the city for payment of this sum as well as outstanding dumpster invoices totaling $68,000. The city has not paid them. Did you see that?
When was the date that this was filed in court?
This was filed on, should have a stamp, well, I'll represent to you that it was filed, I don't have, this doesn't have a stamp, but my footer on the bottom says June 26, 2020. So
Clarify, I'm looking at the e-filed copy, June 26, 2020.
usually I'm right on dates. So this was filed on June 26, 2020.
Okay.
So in preparing for your deposition today, when you read this, did you understand as of June 26, the city had not paid for the unbilled CPI?
Back to the form of the question.
On June 26, you filed a petition, and on June 25th, an invoice is sent to the city. I don't know that it was sent to the city. It was prepared on that date. And you're asking me, would I know if whether this was paid within the time that this was prepared and the time you filed this suit?
Yeah,
No.
okay. But as you sit here today, you said you think it's been paid.
Since these dates
Yes.
is what I'm saying.
So when was it paid?
Well, I don't know that.
What is the basis for your understanding that the city has paid for the unbilled CPI?
What I explained. I read a story in the news that said the city agreed to pay what was owed on another piece of litigation.
That was a lawsuit against the mayor.
I guess. I mean, I see there's a lot of lawsuits floating around, both here, elsewhere. If you're telling me that's the one for the mayor, I presume. I don't know.
Fair enough. Did you ask Mr. Rapier?
Wait. I'm going to object to any
Fair
attorney-client
enough.
communication.
Did you ask Mayor Zahn whether or not the city had paid for this unbilled CPI?
No.
Had you asked Ms. Foshi whether the city had subsequently, after it was invoiced and after the city was sued, if they had subsequently paid Romelli that invoice for $204,000?
No.
So the sole basis of your testimony today that you believe the city of Kenner paid that invoice is you read it in a newspaper article?
I mean,
Well,
I'm just going to
is
object
that-
for that. Wait, let me just object for the animation. I don't know why that's so surprising. It was a quote from Ed in the newspaper, but subject to the objection. I don't know why that's such a
Rephrase,
surprise.
give me the question again.
Is the only basis for your statement that the city of Kenner has paid the $204,000 invoice to Ramelli something you read in a newspaper article?
Yeah.
You didn't follow up and ask if that was accurate to anyone in the city of Kenner administration?
Accurate that we paid, or?
Yeah. Can you answer my question and then
I'm
explain?
trying to.
Did you ask anyone
But I
else?
understand how
You gotta give
answers
him-
go.
now you're arguing. You're obviously arguing with him. Your hands are going. You're arguing. He was about to give you an answer, and you interrupted
enough.
him. Let him answer the question.
It's a yes/no question.
Well, he
Answer
has
it
the
yes,
right- but he-
no,
Patrick, he
and
has
then
the right to
explain.
well, he has the right to elaborate.
Exactly. So
Okay.
give me a yes, no, and then
You
explain
interrupted him
all
before
you
he could
want.
talk.
He started to give me an explanation. I want a yes, no. Did you ask anyone in the administration if they had paid the invoice to Ramelli?
Just established that the only reason he knew is from
When?
reading the article. So I think the answer goes to no. But
At any
answer.
point before today?
Oh, before today. No.
Okay. Now, your testimony is that the sole basis to thinking that the invoice was paid was something you read in the newspaper, right?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to show you. Show you January 15, 2021 article on NOLA.com. Kenner to pay Robert Ramelli $215,000 after issuing him 22,000 littering tickets in garbage dispute. Take a look, read that, and tell me if this is the newspaper article you read that you got the understanding that the city of Kenner had paid Mr. Ramelli for the invoice.
Yes, and after reading the article, it says Kenner will pay $215 to the former garbage contractor. After we replaced IV waste, tickets, attorneys for Robert Ramelli filed a notice of settlement on Thursday. The dismissal order was signed by the judge. City Attorney Ed Rapier contended the payment would have been made even without a suit, arguing the $215 was money the city acknowledged it owed Ramelli. If it was dollars we owed under the contract, Rapier acknowledged the following of suit. Again, that's where I got it from, but I also don't, I don't see where it says this was any form of settlement for the suit. It was, we agreed to pay what was money owed under the contract.
Okay. So this exhibit, what was it,
25.
25 is the sole basis for your understanding that the city has paid the outstanding invoice. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And the basis is a statement made by Mr. Rapier to the news reporter.
That's what I read.
And you accept that as true?
Yeah.
Okay. First sentence of this article says the city of Kenner has paid $250,000 to its former garbage contractor. Do you agree that Mr. Romelli is a former garbage contractor for the city of Kenner? Or do you take issue with that statement in the article?
Let me object to the use of this. This is clearly a hearsay argument. I mean, piece of paper. You know that more than anybody. You told me to go back to law school, so you should know that. Second off, you're asking him to interpret the words of Feynman Roberts III the way he's describing the relationship.
Fair enough.
It's completely inappropriate. We're wasting time. He's here today to answer questions about him. You're doing a 1442 deposition.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
Stop.
You are. You know you are. You haven't asked me anything about
so
who's involved.
you take issue with Mr. Roberts' statement that Mr. Romelli is a former contractor for the city of
That's
Kenner.
another question.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That's all I wanted.
I started it, but yeah.
I clearly understand he's still working for us.
All right. Take a look at Exhibit 26. This is a copy of the settlement agreement in the lawsuit against the mayor. Have you ever seen this before?
I don't think so.
In prepping for your deposition today, you hadn't seen a copy of this?
So I'm going to object to the use of this. If you look at, and we're going to get to this eventually, but despite Section 10 in here, you've attached it to your motion for summary judgment. Now you're using it in the exact same proceeding that you agree that you wouldn't use it to. Look at number 10.
I understand the game.
You can't attach it to the deposition. You should have attached it to your motion, which you know you shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
So, you're being smart earlier, but you can't attach it to the deposition. Correct? You shouldn't have attached it to your motion for summary judgment.
You can make all the legal arguments you want.
No, I will. We will.
Good.
You're asking me who's going to law school and you're attaching inadmissible evidence to summary judgments, and now you're going to use it in a deposition. Wholly inappropriate. So we're not attaching
I'm going
this
to use
to
it in
the
Mr.
deposition.
Rapier's deposition, too.
No, you're not. You're not attaching this to the
Yes, I
deposition.
I am.
No, you're not. You agreed you wouldn't do it in Section 10.
Man, you can file whatever motion you want to.
We're waiting.
I want you to take a look at Exhibit 26. You have not seen
wait,
this
Pat,
before, right?
You admit that this is not supposed to be used at all in this proceeding.
You know what, Matt? Guess what? I don't have to answer questions like you.
There you go.
Take a look at Exhibit 26. This is a settlement agreement for the litigation against the mayor.
And I'm going to
It's
object.
titled
Just testify he
Settlement.
doesn't know anything about this
It's
document.
titled Settlement Agreement and Release. Take a look at paragraph 3. Reservation of claims. Settlement agreement shall encompass only claims asserted in the federal lawsuit. All state law claims, disputes, cause of action, damages, or liabilities of any nature or kind, whether presently asserted or raised in the future, including but not limited to claims arising out of or related to the contract, the Louisiana claims, the reconventional demand, or the 24th JDC lawsuit, are expressly reserved and excluded from this settlement agreement.
And I am instructing Mr. Sigur not to answer any questions about the document that you know shouldn't be used in this proceeding. If you want to call the judge, the phone's right there, but he's not answering any questions about this. We're objecting to it.
Yes, let's get the judge on the line.
Get him on the phone.
Let's get the judge on the line.
Call him.
Let's go off the record and we'll get
You're
the
asking
judge.
questions. First of all, it's wholly inappropriate you're asking these questions to him about this. He wasn't involved in this in any manner. And now you're using a document that you agreed wouldn't be used in the same proceeding you agreed wouldn't be used in. Call the judge and ask him.
Let's do it.
Go.
Let's do it.
For now, at the record, the time is 11:48. Returning to the record, it's 11:51.
Mr. Sigur, just for the record, you're instructing Mr. Sigur not to answer any questions concerning the settlement agreement executed on January 11, 2021 between Romelli and the city of Kenner. Is that correct?
And for the record, besides the fact that this witness has absolutely nothing to do or no knowledge about this settlement agreement, paragraph number 10 of the agreement that Mr. McGoey is trying to use, which has been marked as Exhibit 26, specifically says, and it's labeled inadmissibility, except in an action to enforce the terms of or for breach of the settlement agreement, this settlement agreement shall be inadmissible in evidence and shall not be relied on or used in any manner in any pending or future proceeding or litigations, including but not limited to the 24th JDC lawsuit, which is the very lawsuit that we're here for today. So yes, I have instructed the witness not to answer We've called the judge, we've left a message, and you can reserve your rights to come back if you file your motion.
I'm not filing a motion.
You're not
I'm
answering
reserving.
questions today, so if you need to file a motion, you can file a motion.
I'm not going to have to file a motion. I'm reserving my rights, and if the judge allows me to answer this question, we're going to be back here.
Right, so you
Fair
can
enough.
file your motion to get back here. But
So Mr. Sigur, other than the newspaper article that Mr. Rapier is quoted in, do you have any evidence that the city has paid Mr. Romelli for the invoice that you just looked at?
been asked and answered, but you can't answer it.
I don't maintain evidence. I have thoughts.
Fair enough. Why don't we take a lunch break? We'll come back and say, you want to say one?
Yeah. How much more time I think you have?
Well, off the record, the time is 11:53.
I don't.
Now returning to the record is 12:21.
Mr. Sigur, before the break, we were talking about a settlement agreement in a lawsuit against Mayor Zahn and the city of Kenner that Mr. Romelli had filed.
Patrick, I don't mean to interrupt you, but is there a way to flag this next portion of the deposition on the deposition?
Sure.
To note, just while we're talking about this, and I'll interrupt Patrick again and say when to, I guess, unflag it.
Okay.
But just so we can defer back to
Just
the
mark this
section.
part.
Because we object to all these questions and reserve our right to file a motion to strike it or eliminate, but we object to the next line of questioning.
You were aware that the city of Kenner settled the federal lawsuit against Mayor Zahn, are you not?
As I said, I read the news story.
Do you recall this topic coming up at a city council meeting?
Yeah, I believe it did.
And do you recall Mr. Carroll saying, asking Mr. Rapier for a copy of the settlement agreement?
Agreed.
And do you recall Mr. Rapier saying he would provide the council members a copy of the settlement agreement?
I understand, yes.
Have you been provided a copy of the settlement agreement from the federal lawsuit?
I did receive an email with it attached.
So prior to today, you were given a copy of this settlement agreement,
Yes.
and you had reviewed it when it was sent to you.
I glazed over it.
Okay. So this witness has been provided this document. I'm entitled to ask him questions about it. So I'm going to reiterate my position that I have the right to attach it to this deposition.
No, that's not at all what the judge specifically said. It sounds like it's not going to be allowed at trial, but he was trying to make it, it's not at all what the judge said to make it easy. Since he's here today, we're blocking off this whole
That's fine.
section.
We'll
but
reserve
he
it.
just, but just for the record, he just said he glazed over it. So doesn't mean he
okay.
knows anything about this or can answer questions about it. You can ask him a question. I think he's going to say, I don't know.
Did you understand the reservation of claims section of the settlement agreement to mean that Romelli was not settling or releasing its claim for unbilled CPI?
I have an ongoing objection to every question. It's clearly a legal question.
My answer is, when I glazed over this is a lot of lawyer jumble bumble that I don't understand.
Did you follow up and ask Mr. Rapier any questions about it? Did you ask anyone in the administration questions about it?
No.
Since you toured the facility at Ivy Waste, no, I'll take that back. When's the last time you saw Mr. Nicolosi?
Patrick, you want to interrupt so we can unflag?
Yeah, you can unflag
That'd
it.
be the end of it. All right. All that for that.
Last time I saw Nikki, probably week and a half, 2 weeks ago, was the first time I had seen him throughout this whole COVID event, which started right after this meeting on March 5th.
And where'd you see him?
Trying to recall now. It was, we were all like coming out of the closet, so to speak, from COVID, and it was at some public, I mean, it was just out in the open somewhere. Right now, it was just, hey, how you been? See you later, goodbye.
Okay. Leading up to Ivy taking over the trash collection in Kenner on May 1st, 2020, you recall that's when they did? Do you recall a series of videos were made either leading up to that or shortly after he took over?
Yes,
Okay. Did you attend any of those videos?
yes.
Was Mr. Nicolosi at any of those videos that you attended between the City of Kenner and IV Waste?
Well, I don't really know because I don't know I don't know how many were done. I can maybe think of one that I was involved with, but if there were others that I wasn't there, then I don't know.
Well, the one you were there, what was that one about?
It was, I actually don't recall. It was obviously to announce or promote that we were using his services now.
Okay. And do you recall if Mr. Nicolosi was there?
I don't recall.
You don't recall. Fair enough. Do you know whether or not Mr. Nicolosi has done any work for IV Waste?
Oh, I have no way of knowing that.
Do you know whether or not he's doing any work for the City of Kenner?
Not to my knowledge.
Now, when you took over at being a council member in 2014, did Mr. Nicolosi lobby you on behalf of Romelli?
Object to the form of the question.
Well, the term lobby, meaning speak up for him or try to vote in favor of a contract for him?
Yeah.
I mean, we had conversations to say, yeah, Romelli's providing us the service now. If everything's fine, I probably said, yeah, I don't know, I guess we're fine. So I didn't have, obviously I motioned for the contracts and the amendment that I wouldn't do if I didn't have some confidence.
So Mr. Nicolosi asked you
Oh, well,
to propose ordinances to give Romelli more
that's
money.
not what I
Let me
said.
object to the form of the question.
Okay.
That is not what I
Well, what did
said.
you say?
Well, no, but you see, I'm trying to answer your other question. Did he lobby me? And now you want to say he
Well,
asked me to propose or
what do you
No.
understand lobbying to be?
Trying to gain favoritism?
How so?
Hey, I work for this guy, help me out.
Okay, so Mr. Nicolosi informed you that he worked for Mr. Romelli?
Objection. I think that was a hypothetical. You were asking him what lobbying means. And that,
Did Mr. Nicolosi tell you that he worked for Mr. Romelli?
As you may recall, earlier in this several hours, I explained when I came to be a councilman in 2014 and was needing to determine who to speak to on relative issues with trash pickup, I was referred to Mr. Nicolosi. Whether I knew he worked for him or not, I didn't know. He was just who I was told to refer to at questions. Now, ask somebody else if he works. I don't know that he worked. How do I answer? I don't know that.
So you had meetings with Mr. Romelli, Mr. Nicolosi.
I only had, I think, one meeting with Mr. Romelli.
Okay,
That was
and
what we discussed was on
The recycling,
right,
the adding money
well,
for
the
recycling.
and the trash drop-off site.
Right, that was at that meeting at the cafe.
Right.
Other council members were there, right?
I believe so, to my knowledge.
And you didn't understand that Mr. Nicolosi there was working for Mr. Romelli?
He was representing him, as I was told when I came in as a councilman, that he represented us as the GOP. I don't know, whatever.
So you thought he was there as a member of the Kenner administration, or
No,
he was representing Mr. Romelli?
I assumed he was representing Mr. Romelli, but that's an
And at that
assumption on
meeting
my
at the
part.
cafe in December of 19, Mr. Nicolosi was there with Mr. Romelli asking you to approve the payment of more money to him, to Romelli, for recycling, correct?
This was like a round table discussion, and I can't recall each and every word that everyone said. Mr. Romelli probably asked me to support him and pay him.
The meeting, the Romelli side, it was Mr. Romelli and maybe Mr. Nicolosi, maybe not. They were there asking you all to approve paying them more money for recycling. Was that not the purpose of the meeting?
The discussion was, as we said, on recycling and how to pay for it with the concern of his need for an increase. So we did discuss at this group to do so.
Fair enough. So at that meeting in December of 19, Mr. Romelli, Mr. Nicolosi, other council members were there, and Mr. Romelli and maybe Mr. Nicolosi, you're not sure, were asking for the council to increase the money that you all would pay Mr. Romelli for picking up recycling. Is that your recollection?
The discussion was relative to why there would be a need for an increase. It would have to go through our process to be, we didn't just vote in and say, hey,
understand.
we're giving you an increase.
I understand. I just trying to get understanding of that meeting. What is a pre-agenda meeting?
These are meetings that we meet as with the administration, legal, to go through the items on the agenda, to just, hey, everybody, you ready to go with this? You understand it? Okay.
And where do those take place?
Various places.
Such as?
Well, we've had them in conference rooms inside of the building where the administration and the council are at. We've had them for the last year and a half on Zoom.
Okay. And who participates in those pre-agenda meetings?
Whoever is in, we cannot meet with more than 3 councilmen at a time. That's a clear, what is it, a state law that says quorums. So
you're saying that these pre-agenda meetings, you all don't have more than 3 council members there?
correct,
Okay.
and usually less than 3.
So on June 11th, the Attorney General sent a letter to the City Council of Kenner. Do you recall?
I'll
show you one of them marked.
the one.
Exhibit 27. I'm interested in the section that starts on the bottom of page 2 and goes to page 3.
I thought, well, okay, let me finish reading because seems to be on a different topic than where you were headed with your question. But
I'm interested starting the paragraph that says, finally, Mayor Zahn seemingly admits to participating in a walking quorum with members of the council. Do you see that on the bottom of page 2?
I'm reading that. Well, yes, I see this, but as I'm aware of my understanding of a walking quorum, as 7 members of a council, as citizens, we come across each other a lot. I can't say that we're not in a I'm not saying it's a quorum, but if in a structured setting of a council meeting, it requires 4 council members to constitute a quorum. But if 4 council members are ever seen together, is that a quorum? It's not a council meeting. So there's no, as I would appreciate, sequestering of us to say that we can never see and have us together 4 at a time. The question is whether we're discussing how we're going to vote. As what I appreciate this opinion is trying to assert, that we cannot talk amongst ourselves how we're going to vote. So, I'm not.
So before this letter, June 11, 2020, at the pre-agenda meetings, would there be more than 4 council members?
No.
Okay. So you don't recall any pre-agenda meetings where there were 4 council members?
There never was, because
Okay.
if we were, I would walk out.
All right. So you were aware of the walking quorum requirement?
Walking quorum requirement is, my understanding from these opinions, that if 4 of us are together talking about how we're going to vote, or if 3 of us are together talking, and then we leave and go talk to others how we discuss or how we're going to vote, is a walking quorum.
Fair enough. And it's your testimony that you never had a walking quorum?
Correct, because I don't operate that way.
Do you recall of making a video with maybe all the council members and Mayor Zahn in May of 2020 where you talked about IV waste and supporting IV waste, and we had a bunch of garbage cans behind you? You don't remember that?
Yeah.
You didn't consider that a walking quorum?
It's not a, as I recall, we weren't discussing how to vote on legislation. We were supporting a service we were interested in receiving.
And what was that service you were interested in receiving?
Well, first off, can you give me the date that when that video was made? Because I want to make sure, as I'm answering, that I'm giving you my true understanding of the chronological order
Sure.
of things.
I'm not positive as we sit here today of that exact date. I know it was after May 7th, because that's when Mr. Romelli got a TRO against Mr. Torres from touching his cans.
Okay, so if it's after May 7th, that means it's after when the council had voted to accept this other contract for services.
Yes.
So we're not in no reason to need to discuss that contract of service. It's already been approved.
Were you aware that a judge in Jefferson Parish declared that contract illegal that you approved, and actually you went back and approved another contract?
I don't know the timeline to say that the judge had ruled that already, but I don't even know if the judge ruled that. We did go back. Can you give me some dates? You're asking me to answer something that I don't know the chronological.
I understand, and we just went down this trail because you said different things. So
No, you asked me a question and brought me somewhere that I now want to ask for the chronological timeline, so I'm sure when I answer that I'm giving you the correct answer. You're asking me about a video that I made, that I agree I made a video, but it never was talked about how I'm going to vote on a litigation, or I mean not litigation, or legislation.
Well, do you recall on June 4th council meeting, it was still a question of whether or not you were going to approve a contract with IV Waste?
Show me the agenda for June 4th.
Do you recall that meeting? You don't recall that meeting? It was by Zoom?
I know the date of the meeting. I'm asking for the date of the meeting.
June 4th.
Show them the document that you're referring to.
All right, so what I'm going to show you is a video. This is on YouTube, and you're aware that Kenner publishes its council meetings on YouTube.
Sure.
This is from June 4th, and
Well, I don't see that. Where?
I'll just have to take my word for it. We'll just...
So now we're at the point that if we did not approve this contract or this ordinance, which again authorized the mayor to fulfill this contract, we would be in a pretty stinky, trashy mess because we would not have garbage pickup taking place immediately after.
So I'll represent to you, this was a June 4th council meeting, whereby you approved the most recent contract with IV Waste, where the price was $11.28 a service unit. Do you recall that? You approved an ordinance allowing the mayor to enter into that contract.
I recall having to vote a second time for the initial vote that we took based upon some legal concern.
And you recall, at that meeting, you were promoting the city entering into that contract, right? You voted for it.
Object to the form of the question.
You can answer.
At that time is when the topic of a legislation is up on our agenda and is allowed to have discussions. So I am discussing what we're getting ready to vote on.
Right.
But I'm allowed to do so at that time with all of these other council members around me.
I understand.
Well, no, I'm not sure because you're asking me earlier about walking quorums. Well, this is a council meeting. We're in a public meeting. All of my council colleagues are there present. So any conversation that any of us had is permissible.
I noticed on that, well, that clip we just watched at this June 4th council meeting, you said if we don't approve IV Waste contract, we're going to have no one to pick up our garbage. Is that what not you said?
Well, yeah.
Well, I
Because
thought Mr. Romelli was still a contractor of the city.
well, wait. Okay. That is
Was
saying
Mr. Romelli a contractor on June 4th, 2020?
he was still under contract.
So why wasn't he an option to pick up the garbage?
Check the form of the question. Call to speculation if you know.
No, I mean, I'm assuming at that time he's still under contract, and he was still doing work for the city. Just what services he was doing, and then what services we were discussing at that point.
What services was Mr. Romelli doing in June of 2020 under the 2016 contract that you executed?
It's, again, my understanding that he's still doing what they call dumpster pickups.
Under that contract?
Yeah.
Okay, the contract you executed lists the dumpster locations that are provided for in the contract, does it not?
It should.
Okay, so do you know where Mr. Romelli's picking up a dumpster?
Well, I've seen one of his dumpsters at the police department.
Okay. Confirm for me that the police department dumpster is not part of this contract.
Confirm that it's not or confirm that it
Well,
is?
you can look, tell me if it is. In section 3B1, that lists the dumpster locations, right? That are provided for under this contract?
At this time.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe.
Confirm for me
other-
that the contract you executed does not refer to a dumpster at the police department.
If you're asking me, is it listed in this list? I don't see it.
Okay. So it's your position that, it's your understanding? Sorry. Is it your understanding that the contract was amended to add a dumpster at the police department?
However, I mean, I don't know that every dumpster addition has to be by the amendment. It's just a service. You add it to the service and say, we need a dumpster here, and bill us for it.
So who do you understand was paying for the dumpster, pays Romelli for the dumpster at the police department
City of Kennet,
under this contract?
I would hope so.
It's my understanding that when an item is paid for at the city of Kenner, it's got to be tagged to a contract number. Are you familiar with that?
No.
You're not aware of that?
No.
Okay. Now, you were aware that Mr. Romelli was issued 22,000 litter citations?
I heard about it.
Right. Did you have any involvement in that?
Not the one to issue them, no.
Okay. It's my understanding that the summonses were written up on May 12th at El Paso Restaurant in Kenner in a meeting with Mayor Zahn and other Kenner officials. Were you at that meeting?
I was at a lunch with the mayor. I don't know if any citations were issued because I didn't see no code enforcement director writing 22,000 citations.
Okay, so you recall being at El Paso Restaurant on May 12th with the mayor?
Should I take a formal question? I think that mischaracter.
You can answer whatever.
Well, I have lunch with a variety of people specific. You're asking me a date and time. I don't have no way to verify that date and time at this moment.
Okay, when the litter citations were issued, it was a big deal, right? There was a federal lawsuit about it. It was in the paper. Do you recall that?
I recall a lot of events that occurred in that time.
Perfect.
World.
Were you at the meeting where the citations were written up?
I just said I didn't see anybody write citations at a lunch.
I didn't ask you if you saw.
Well, then no, I don't know.
Okay, you don't know. Do you know James Muhammad?
Yes.
Was he at El Paso Restaurant? Do you recall having lunch with him?
No, I didn't have lunch with him.
Okay. Do you recall him ever showing up at one of your lunches at El Paso in May of 2020 with the mayor?
You know, people come to the table, say hello, walk off. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Do you recall him showing up?
Just objection. I don't know what you mean by showing up, but
Okay. I mean, I don't want to be in a
it's okay to
position-
say you don't know.
I
If
don't
you don't know, you can ask.
Right, that's what I'm
Mr.
trying to say.
Amelia, rephrase it.
I don't know specifically any one date and time who came and
Okay. Fair enough. So as you sit here today, you can't tell me one way or the other if you were at that El Paso restaurant on May 12th, where the citations were written.
Not at this time.
Fair enough.
No.
You can tell me you're aware that the mayor was sued about those citations, right?
I read the news.
Did you read the opinion from the federal judge that prevented the mayor from going forward with a hearing on those citations?
What it was in the newspaper, yeah.
Okay. Other than the newspaper, you didn't talk to anybody in the city of Kenner with it?
Not that I recall.
All right. And at that June 4th council meeting, do you recall telling the public you were alarmed by a story you had saw on WWL about Mr. Romelli?
Yes.
What do you recall about that?
That we were being billed for things that were not being done.
And what was that?
The way the recycling was being handled and or dumpsters that we were being billed for that were not being serviced by him.
And you recall at that June 4th council meeting that you commended David Hammer for his due diligence in putting together that report?
Sure.
What due diligence did you do before that June 4th
I had no
meeting?
knowledge that that was happening.
So you didn't do anything before June 4th at that council meeting to determine whether or not what Mr. Hammer was saying on the news was accurate?
I didn't need to. I had no belief that there was something sinister or unscrupulous or criminal going on. If I had, then I would have taken action. But at David Hammer's story is his journalistic results of his investigation that I listen to and go, ooh.
And you commended him for it, right?
Yeah.
And do you recall at that council meeting saying that Mr. Romelli had misled you?
If his contract says he's to provide a service.
My question is, do you remember saying it?
Yes.
Okay.
But
What
now,
did-
wait.
No.
Now
you
you
can-
can explain his answer.
Now, yes, if I have a contract where he says, I'm going to provide this service and do this and do that, and then I'm learning that he did not do that, then yes, I'm dissatisfied and unhappy.
But you said he misled you.
Okay,
What
I
did
was
you mean?
also misled.
What do you mean by
Because
that?
a contract says this is what I'm going to do, and if you're not doing it, then I used the word misled, so I assumed it was being misled.
Did you not know at that June 4th meeting that the administration had put together the information to give to Mr. Hammer?
No,
Were you not aware of that?
no.
Well, you saw on the TV that the mayor gave an interview with Mr. Hammer, right? For the story?
I get. I don't recall, but okay if you said that.
Did you know that Mr. Rapier had given information
No.
to WWL?
No.
Were you aware that Mr. Rapier had affidavits prepared for former Romelli employees? Do you
No.
recall that?
No.
All right. I'm going to show you the video so we can both be on the same page of
Okay.
that council meeting and what you said about it.
You're gonna somehow attach this to?
I'm not. It's out on YouTube. I mean, I just want refreshing his recollection so we're all on the same page when I ask him questions.
For the record, I think he said he remembered everything, but if you want to show it to prove a point, I'd like to see it too.
So I think it's, certainly imperative that we move with this and go forward. Now, just on a personal note, I watched a news story on Channel 4 last night that alarmed me to a great extent and certainly disappointed me to an even more extent, because when I was fortunate to come in and serve as acting mayor, one of the first things that I was able to get involved and take part of was fulfilling a lot of residents' requests to go back to curbside recycling. So I started the process with the administration that I had at the time to do that. And we were fortunate to find the funds to do that and re-sign an additional amendment or supplement to that original IV contract the Romelli contract to get curbside recycling. And I was happy because I'm a very strong believer in recycling because of our ecology, the planet. These are things that if we don't take care of in the future generations, we're even with a mess. And I certainly am passionate about the recycling of things that we should be doing. But after watching that story, and I commend Channel 4, David Hammer, for his diligence in putting that story together, I'm just dismayed to find out that my good intentions seem to be worthless and useless because the contractor chose not to recycle the items that we wanted to be recycled. That it appears that let's go throw it in with the regular garbage and I don't have to deal with the recycling issue. And that caused us a big problem because that increases our tip fees. A tip fee is the tonnage price that we pay the landfill for the garbage that we collect from our residents and get it out of their site and move over to the landfill. So when we're thinking that we're doing good for the ecology and our planet, we find out all we're doing is piling more trash into a landfill and paying more money to the landfill operator for that additional trash. So again, this is really disheartening to see that a contractor that I entrusted to do this would do this to this city and our residents, and I'm very, very dismayed and disappointed that this took place. And I don't think it's, I presume that these kind of stories don't just end with the TV story. I'm sure there'll be some other questions and things that'll come out of it in time to make more sense and hold accountable for these actions. So with that though, I'll yield the rest to my colleagues.
All right, my first comment is
Well,
nowhere
I
in
don't
here
know
that I
word
said misled, and you said I said misled.
I was gonna
Why
make the
is
same
that?
objection. I didn't hear the word misled one time in the entire comment.
Play it again. I never said misled. You said that, implying that I said it. I don't appreciate that.
I'm not trying to,
You questioned me on why I said misled, and you played this video to prove your point. Nowhere in there did I hear. Did anybody else hear the word misled?
No, I was about to make the same objection. I was
Fair
listening
enough.
for it the whole time.
Let's see mine.
okay. I'm not going to play it back. If I said something that offended you, I apologize. I believe you said misled somewhere, but I don't need that for today's deposition. My question is when you said this on June 4th, were you unaware that the administration had been preparing and working with WWL for almost a month for this story?
I'm just going to object because just for the record, we don't want to play it back, but I think you were asking the word misled. You kept saying misled, 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 and then now we play the tape, and clearly, I think we all agree that the word misled was not said one time in there. So I don't know why you're going to go back to this video, because the way y'all have interpreted it is clearly completely different than
All right,
what it says. And I have to keep going back to every little thing, but that's the same thing as paragraph 50 in y'all's lawsuit, and it's continuing to be a pattern.
Were you not aware on June 4th that the administration had been working with WWL
Right.
on that story?
Objection has been asked and answered. He said, I was not aware, I don't know.
Is that true? That was your testimony?
Well, if the way you phrasing the question, my answer is yes. But I'm explaining I was not aware.
Okay, you were not aware that the administration was working with WWL for this story?
Yes.
So the first time you learned of it is when you saw that story?
Of the information that Mr. Hammer presented.
Right.
Yes.
And on that article, he posted I'm going to show you the article that WWL ran. I'm going to mark it as Exhibit 28. Ask you to take a look at it. This is where I got the word misled.
Different than the video.
On the bottom of the second page, it says, Sigur said he felt personally misled by Romelli. Is that not what this article
No,
said?
wait a second.
No.
That's not quoted, and why?
I understand. I'm just clearing this for the record. That's where I got misled
Well, it's
from.
clear for the record. You agree that you were questioning him on a video from June 4th about him saying misled, went into this whole big animation, you pull up the video, and it doesn't say misled. But now you're showing him a news article where there's no quotes around it. It's a quote from a this is what you keep doing. We don't care what David Hammer says. I mean, ask him facts about the case.
I am.
You're not. You're
I
not.
am.
We've been here all day, and you've spent 20 minutes on what he knows. And I know this is a fishing expedition, but let's get to the point.
Are you finished with the speaking objection?
No, I am. I think we're both frustrated. This is continuing to happen throughout the case, where it's,
This is the first time you've given me a deposition. I don't have depositions of anybody else, which I'm not going to leave today without getting dates to depose the other witnesses I've been asking for.
that's all
So
the
you say it's been
discovery-
going throughout.
It's mutual obligations that neither one has done. Where's the discovery? We're supposed to get that weeks ago.
I want the depositions, but
The
anyway.
depositions are going to have to be worked on with the judge.
So you read the article, you saw the article that said you were misled, but you don't believe you were misled by Mr. Romelli. Is that your testimony today?
Check to the point. It's completely irrelevant at this point.
I don't know how to answer a question when I don't understand. I am clearly, from experience, understand newspaper reporters doing all sorts of things with things we say. I have no defense, I have no way of explaining. I've had conversations with them, and they still do it.
Did you ever talk to the mayor about this topic? That is, Romelli taking your recycling and dumping it in the landfill.
After hearing this story, after the council meeting, I said what I said.
Yeah, other than that,
Yes.
Other than that council meeting, do you have any other conversations with him or the administration about it?
No.
All right. I'll show you what I'm going to mark as Exhibit 29, which is a letter dated May 6, 2020 from Mr. Rapier to the FBI, the Chief of Police of Kenner, the Jefferson Parish District Attorney, and the U.S. Attorney regarding Ramelli Janitorial Services.
I might have missed it. Have you asked him if he's seen this document before?
I'm waiting for a question. I don't know the question yet.
Have you seen this document before?
No.
It was shown in the WWL video that you commended Mr. Hammer on. Do you not recall that?
I do not recall it.
Fair enough. Paragraph 5 of this affidavit, let's look at the first affidavit by Earl Sylvester. You see paragraph 5, it says, on many occasions of the last several years, I and others employed by Ramelli were instructed to not deliver the recyclable material to the recycling facility, but rather to mix the recycling material with ordinary waste to be delivered to the River Birch landfill in Ramelli waste truck for disposal in the landfill. Was that the subject of the WWL TV report that you saw and commended Mr. Hammer on?
If you say this was included in that story that I don't specifically recall seeing or have any opportunity to read it as it scanned across a movie screen, this is what I relied on.
And that's what you understood. And June 4th was that there was testimony from former Ramelli employees that that's what they were told to do. Mix recycling with waste and dump it at the landfill?
I'm going to object to the form of the question.
Wait, are you implying, because I don't recall, that these individuals were at that June 4th meeting and talked?
No, I'm implying that they were in the WWL report that you complimented Mr. Hammer on.
Oh, who was in the report? These two?
Yeah.
Do you have the video?
It's online. You can see it.
Well, I mean, he clearly doesn't remember everything you're asking. It's clearly a disconnect here. I'm confused, talking about things that clearly aren't relevant.
Do you know who notarized this affidavit?
Nope.
Is that Mr. Rapier's signature?
I cannot make out his signature.
All right. Are you aware that Earl Sylvester has given sworn testimony in another case and said that, in fact, this affidavit was false? He never was instructed by Ramelli to do that.
I'm not aware. What? I'm not aware.
Does that change, if you were provided that information, would that change your commending Mr. Hammer on this report?
Object to the form of the question. Calls for speculation and facts. That is not put into the record.
All right, I'm going to show you a deposition transcript that I'm going to mark as Exhibit 30 of Earl Sylvester. You said it's not in evidence, so I'm going to give it to you right now.
Continue objection, but
Give
now
it to
we're
you right
showing
now.
him the deposition of somebody else. I don't even know where we are at this point, but assuming you're almost done.
I have a bad faith breach of contract claim.
Right.
And I have sworn affidavits prepared by the city attorney and given to the FBI. And I have this council member commenting at a council meeting about what a great job it was that this was done in this reporting. And I'm showing this witness a deposition transcript that shows that the affidavit was a lie.
Okay.
So that's where I was to get you up to speed.
Well, give me up to speed. Where's the bad faith? Have you proven your breach, and what is the bad faith?
All right.
This makes. I'm letting you go, but so we don't have to come back.
Take a look at page 52 of Mr. Earl Sylvester's deposition, which is Exhibit 30 that I just gave you.
Wait. Page 52. I only see 5 pages.
Do you have the
See up at
entire
the top,
deposition?
page 52.
Wait, Patrick, do you have the entire deposition?
Oh.
So we're just going to introduce a couple pages that you picked out of the entire deposition?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Okay. So we want to, wait, so you want us to rely on a couple pages out of the entire deposition?
I want to show this witness this testimony and see if that changes his perception of the WWL
Show him
report.
the WWL report. Why are we hiding the ball? Show him the report. Show him everything. I mean, he had to ask you to show him the other thing that was clearly not
on
what
line
you were saying.
16 of page 52, question number 5. You see number 5 in front of you? It says, on many occasions over the last several years, I and others employed by Ramelli were instructed to not deliver the recycled material to the recycling facility, but rather to mix the recycled material with the ordinary waste to be delivered to the River Birch landfill in a Ramelli waste truck for disposal in the landfill. Answer, indicating negatively. Question, is that accurate? Answer, no. So no one with Ramelli ever instructed you not to deliver recycled materials to a recycle facility? Answer, no, indicating negatively. That's not true.
Object
you
this
asked
entire
me.
line of question.
Do you still think Mr. Hammer did a good job reporting on that story now that you've had an opportunity to see portion of an affidavit from the person who signed the affidavit saying it was false?
I'm going to object.
I'm just asking.
I don't think it says that at all. It doesn't say it's. Read the entire page into the record, 52. He starts talking about what's false and not false. You're taking a snippet. This is absolutely.
Does that change your
absurd.
perception of the reporting?
I don't know what you've shown me to change.
I don't know how to answer that because I have nothing in front of me to base it on. I mean, and then indicating negatively, who made that decision?
Just go read the entire page.
You can read the whole thing.
Want me to continue or just this one?
Yeah, just so you can see the whole thing.
I don't have any other questions about it, but you can read it if you like.
No, if you don't have more questions.
All right. Going back to the March 5th, 2020 council meeting, that was the first time the IV waste contract was brought up for vote or on the ordinance. That was the contract we saw with the $12.32 price. You recall that meeting?
Yes.
All right. Do you recall it during that meeting you left the podium area where you sit up there and you went in the back hallway and had a conversation with Mr. Torres?
Yes.
What were you talking to Mr. Torres about?
There was a provision, a language that was relative to the replacement of garbage cans that I was not clear of. I wanted to get an understanding because my understanding was that was supposed to be in the contract was if a resident can went missing, that it was to be replaced at no cost. As I'm recalling, the language that was in the contract said it had to be, they had to pay for it, and I was not in favor of that. So I was straightforward asking him, is this what you're agreeing to, or would you agree to if a resident loses a can that at least the first time it's not their responsibility? And he agreed. I came back out, I attempted to amend the contract to do such that. In fact, I think though Mr. Carroll got the credit for amending it. But I started that conversation to amend it.
How did you get to meet Mr. Torres in the back? You texted him during the council meeting?
I'm looking at him and I'm going,
You didn't text him?
I don't recall. But I'm trying to get his attention to get that answered while we're in the midst of that discussion so I can clear that issue up, because that was something that I had gotten from residents that they were not happy with.
And was there a reason you didn't ask the city attorney about that provision at the council meeting?
If I have Mr. Torres there, I would go straight to him at that point to ensure that if he says, yeah, I'm agreeable to that, then I'm going to come back and introduce an amendment to that. That's all I needed at that point.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have Mr. Torres' cell phone number?
Sure.
So you've texted him.
Give me your number and I'll put it in my phone and I'll say I have your phone number too.
So did you send him any text prior to that March 5th, 2020 council meeting?
That's a good question. I don't know.
How did you get his cell number?
When we took the tour, he probably gave it to me.
Okay. So before the tour, you hadn't had any communications with Mr. Torres?
No.
But as you sit here today, you recall you have texted him.
Well, I'm not saying that. I don't recall. You asked me, did I text him at the meeting? I was trying to get his attention. If I texted him and I don't know if it went through, I didn't get a response, so that's when I'm getting his attention to meet me because I want to speak to him.
Fair enough.
So I don't know if I type something on my phone, if it doesn't go there, is that a text?
I don't know.
Well, there you go.
All right, if you give me a break, take a break, might be close to wrapping this up.
Well, again, I would hope to make my 2 o'clock. Tell me if I'm not so I can move on.
Yeah, you'll make it 2 o'clock.
Step ahead.
Okay.
Well, off the record, the time is 1:11.
This is
Returning to the record, it's 1:18.
Mr. Sigur, just a few follow-up questions. When you, over your 33 years, when you were in the Kenner Police Department, were you a detective, you said?
I served as a jailer, patrolman, detective.
And did you have any businesses outside of your work in the police department?
I had a business between 1982 and 1991,
And what was that business?
a video rental business.
And was that in Kenner?
Nope,
Where was that?
Laplace,
And what was the name of that?
Home Video Entertainment of Laplace.
Home Video Entertainment of LaPlace? In connection with your work in the police department, were you ever investigated for unethical conduct
Not so
in connection with the construction of the Kenner Police Department headquarters?
An allegation was made.
What was that allegation?
It was
Let
numerous.
me just object to this line of questioning.
Was there an investigation done into you?
I can't answer. I don't know.
Were you ever suspended or from any activities in the police department?
No.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you for your time today.
We didn't talk about reading the sign. You can send it directly to Mr. Sigur, and you can
No.
read over and make any grammatical changes or anything
Yeah, do you
like
want,
that.
he wants to read and sign?
You want to? I'm assuming more homework. You want to look over the deposition before it's finalized and make sure that there's nothing incorrect.
Yeah.
That's fine. So Connie will send you, here, I'll give you that, take those. Connie will send a draft of it, you can look at it and read it. I mean, you can't change testimony, but if you said yes and it was no, or if you said somebody's name is misspelled, you get to correct it and send it back to her. All right.
We are now at the record. This concludes this deposition. Time is 1:20.